What is up, everyone? Welcome to Gentlemen of the Corax. We have this episode that's going to basically be a battleground between non-marine formations. So this includes terrestrial and non-marine, as in like freshwater environments as well. And we're going to basically be putting formations from all over the world and throughout deep time up against each other in a March Madness style bracket competition. So without further ado, we'll get into some introductions. My name is Ben Goode. I'm a chondrichthyan researcher. I'm the host of Elasmocast and the owner of On Point Fossils LLC.
I'm Jared Cooke. I'm a Texas A&M undergraduate zoology student, and my research interest is currently with mosasaurs, and I also dabble in fish. And apart from that, I make content about paleontology on TikTok and Instagram.
My name's Harrison Duran. I'm a paleontologist based out of Spearfish, South Dakota, and I excavate primarily in the Hell Creek Formation, although I'm in the Bridger Formation as well in Wyoming. And I excavate on private and county land and own and operate my own independent practice for excavating and preparing fossils. And I also do content as well, posting on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Starting to get into YouTube.
All right, and I'm Zeke. I do the Raptor Chatter YouTube channel where we cover all kinds of paleo topics. And then looking for grad school and currently doing research for paleoecology mostly.
My name's Russell Engelman. I'm a PhD student at Case Western Reserve University, and my research mostly focuses on fossil mammals, but I do dabble in fossil fish.
I'm Cole Counts. I'm a geologist, but I'm a geologist, natural history enthusiast, and I spend my summers working on giant Triassic ichthyosaurs out in Nevada.
So yeah, before we get into our battle, we're going to have Zeke discuss what exactly formations are.
Yeah, so formations are actually really good to talk about where I live in northern Arizona because we have such simple straight layers of rock. So for example, you have the Coconino sandstone, which based on the rock types that are there, it was a big sand dune desert, and that is one environment, and that's why that is the Coconino sandstone. Just above that, though, you start to get a more marine environment, you start getting seashells and things, and so that becomes the Kaibab limestone. So what you're seeing in those different formations is basically just different environments and how they're interacting on top of one another through time.
Awesome. So without further ado, let's start the fight.
And see this bracket finally.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it too.
First,
Oh,
contestants are the Garra Spa Formation versus the Dinosaur Park Formation.
Ooh.
no.
For those that don't know, Garra Spa, that's the most fossiliferous formation within the Chem group. So if you're at like any fossil show basically and you see Spinosaur or Carcharodontosaur teeth, those are most of the time going to be coming from this formation within the Chem beds of Morocco.
And the Dinosaur Park formation, let me get this. I didn't read too much on the Dinosaur Park formation. That's a Campanian formation. Is this the one that has all the Albertosaurus or all the Daspletosaurus in it?
It's got Gorgosaurus and Daspletosaurus.
Yes.
Albertosaurus is like Horseshoe Canyon, which is stratigraphically
it's-
above it by about 2 million years.
Yeah, it's Albertosaurus is like earliest Maastrichtian.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so we're talking Daspletosaurus and Gorgosaurus. Good to know. And this is in what, Canada, right? The Dinosaur Park?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is the one where most of Dinosaur Provincial Park is this.
Gotcha.
So yeah, this is your Dinosaur Park formation Badlands, and those are very nice Badlands. I will say a lot of these photos are probably taken right after rain, just from what I know of Badlands, because it's normally going to look a lot more dry and less green than this. But it is still very nice Badlands. I love seeing me some. I love this. Badlands are like my favorite landscape type, even when it is dry. So,
And could you pull up the Garra Spa to compare?
The
I think we're doing
Garrispa,
the actual
supposedly
topography.
it has like some really, really high cliffs. I remember
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ibrahim had like some pictures of it when he was he came through Cleveland and he gave a talk on his research. Like those are some really big cliffs.
Well, and even like the big monograph describing the Chem group, which this is one part of it. So when I was talking about formations earlier, a group is just multiple formations that are related to one another, but still show different parts of the environment. So the
And
formation on the bottom of the Chem is kind of upland river, and then as you get further down, it becomes the other formation. Is I believe my understanding. If not, it's backwards, but
Yeah, and Chem, for those that don't know, is Cenomanian in age. So it's still late Cretaceous, but it's the earliest stage of the late Cretaceous compared to the Campanian, which is right before the Maastrichtian, so it's a second to last stage.
So let's just try and quantify this first. If we're going to compare them, we got to compare the animals. So if we're talking the dinosaur park formation, this is Campanian, so we're going to have a boatload of ceratopsians.
true.
I don't know.
when you say a boatload, the largest mass death assemblage of any known dinosaur, I think.
I would say more than a boatload because I don't think you could fit all those bones on all those animals on a single boat.
Yeah. So like between hundreds to thousands of Centrosaurus individuals that
Holy cow.
we've known about for
Yeah.
years, but kind of like the block of Utah raptors. We don't know like not much has been published on like these guys in terms of census, but there is an enormous death assemblage of almost entirely Centrosaurus apertus.
And are the ceratopsians there particularly diverse? Because I know in the camp
Very diverse. I think it's the high point of ceratopsian diversities in that formation. So you have Centrosaurus, you have Chasmosaurus, you have Styracosaurus, you've got
So since it was named as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, there's also Unescosaurus,
yep.
which is a ceratopsian, but this is a very different kind of ceratopsian in that it's a leptoceratopsid, which means instead of thinking about something, the size of a garbage truck, you're thinking about something the size of like almost a large remote control car, where it's a much smaller animal, maybe the size of like a medium-sized dog.
Yeah, there's
So very
material
large remote
from something
control.
like Pentaceratops, there's Mercuriceratops, and this is all like the dinosaur park formation like preserves more than 5 million years, right? It's like 6 to 7 million years, and you have like faunal turnover happening within the formation over that time.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
Good
and even
hadrosaur diversity too.
Yeah,
Lambeosaurus,
Yeah.
Parasaurolophus,
Edmontosaurus.
Montosaurus.
yeah,
Okay.
and when you
There's no
see those,
Edmontosaurus in it.
Oh, sorry. What's the it's not Prosaurolophus. What's the Saurolophine that they get there? The real common one.
there's Griposaurus, Prosaurolophus,
Prosaurolophus. Sorry, my bad.
Lambeosaurus,
Saurolophines.
you get a good spread of
Yeah.
of hadrosaurs.
Lambeosaurus, Parasaurolophus, the Canadian species, like the type is from here. Um, Corythosaurus. So like lots and lots and lots of not like the most famous dinosaurs ever, but a huge proportion of the dinosaurs that were in your encyclopedias when you were a child are coming out of the dinosaur park formation.
Well, and if you're thinking about some of those more famous dinosaurs that we'll run into later here in a bit on one of these other formations, it's kind of like almost the precursors of that environment
Right.
you find in the dinosaur park, but
Got it.
arguably a more diverse assemblage.
Yeah. Nothing's as big as the classic like Hell Creek stuff like Triceratops and Rex and Montosaurus, but there's so many different types, so many different and they're everybody's got strange head ornamentation. There's so much, kind of like different ecologies happening in between all these groups that are closely related. It's a high watermark for dinosaur diversity.
Yeah.
And then when we're talking theropods, like you said, Daspletosaurus, Scorysaurus, what else? What else shows up in there?
Zeke, you want to take the
Yeah, so you get some of
take the
these
Troodon
ornithomime.
question?
Yeah, so you get, the big tyrannosaurids, which are obviously very charismatic, but you do get, I believe, gosh, what is it? Sauronitholestes, which is kind of think Velociraptor, but a little bit bigger because real life Velociraptor was much smaller than what we see, as we will talk about in Jurassic Park. But so you get that kind of those kinds of dromaeosaurs, raptor type dinosaurs. You also get a good diversity of oviraptorans. So when you're thinking about the egg thief dinosaurs that were actually protecting their own eggs, you get a lot of them here, and I think it's a really underappreciated amount of diversity that exists in this group. Because you get Cytopes, you get Cristinodes. Uh,
Chirostenodes. Oh, sorry.
okay, no, that works. I'm
and
pronunciation
Canignathus,
not perfectly for me. And Cagnathus, yeah.
a big Canignathan. So like,
Yeah.
100 pounds.
So yeah, you're getting these, pretty diverse oviraptorans from here. Um, and then also, like I said, you get Dromaeosaurus, you get Sauronitholestes. So you're getting a
You have
good
like three different
diversity.
species of troodontids and like four different tooth taxon.
Yeah, which tooth taxa are their whole own issue of naming an animal based off of only teeth.
Yeah.
But you're getting a good diversity there. And then finally, you're also getting the ornithomimus. So the ornithomimids, the ostrich mimic dinosaurs that are potentially much more herbivorous, if not omnivorous, that are just fundamentally so different from what we normally think of for most theropods, right? Where they're totally toothless, still reaching moderately large sizes. They're not, the biggest things around there, but they're larger than the oviraptorans that are in the formation. And yeah, like I said, you're getting a good diversity of a lot of moderately sized theropods, not all of whom are carnivorous.
Gotcha.
And five different pachycephalosaurs that are real, yeah, five different valid pachycephalosaur
Holy
taxa.
cow.
Yeah, and to go on to the Garrisba Formation, this one is famous for its super large diversity of large carnivorous animals with a weird contrast where there's very little herbivorous animals found in this formation. So the most common
Yeah, I'll go.
fossil found is is Onchopristis numitus, which is a saw skate, and you'll find these rostral spines everywhere in like fossil shows and things like that. They're pretty abundant. They're actually not closely related to sawfish. They're another convergently evolved um, spined rostrum that was in a lineage more closely related to skates than they are to sawfish. But anyways, those are the most abundant thing. And then you see tons of, like I said before, Spinosaur teeth and Carcharodontosaur teeth. A lot of times they'll give names like they'll name it Carcharodontosaurus saharicus for the teeth, but I wouldn't recommend labeling those isolated teeth with a full species designation. But anyways, most of the stuff found here, while it's super abundant, tends to be pretty isolated. There isn't a ton of articulated remains, though surprisingly, there is actually a fish lagersod within this.
Hmm.
So that's kind of cool that I didn't know until I was looking up this
There's
for.
a bunch of pterosaurs, a
There are.
bunch,
I
like
think
10
I think one
more.
of the best things for this formation and really this whole group, the ChemChem group, is I'm going to start sharing. Um, you actually have this entire list of taxa of the vertebrate taxa that's been found in the ChemChem group. Um, in the paper by Ibrahim et al. 2020 that describes just the group in the geology. And as you can see, there's a ton of stuff. So far, we're only in fish, so there's a very rich fish fauna that are living in this essentially massive river that is draining out most of North Africa at this time. Um, and then as you continue downwards, you start getting into squamates, so lizards and things. You can be even a little more specific with iguanids. Um, and then, of course, as you scroll down, you start getting into your theropods. So you have a balosaurs, which in this case, Deltadromeus is a little bit up for debate as to what kind of a balosaur it was, but likely
I think
some
it's still
sort
up
of.
for debate if it's even a ceratosaur or not, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
Deltadromeus is a very interesting animal, which you could talk about for ages. Regardless, you have Carcharodontosaurus, and they say Saharicus. That's seemingly right for now, but again, taxonomy is all over the place. Some sort of dromaeosaur, so again, a raptor dinosaur. And you'll even have a noasaur, and the noasaurs are ceratosaurids, but they are much more herbivorous. They went through this huge evolutionary change, and they're really one of the first groups to start doing this. And this is kind of one of their last occurrences that we know of. There's a few other occurrences in South America that are later than this, but again, there's just so much here that we know exists that we don't have a good understanding of yet.
Yeah,
Interesting.
this is the
there,
formation that they found a partial skeleton of the quote unquote Deltadromeus.
And of course, there is the big one, Spinosaurus, Moroccensis, or Egyptiacus, depending on how you define the neotype of it. But again, Spinosaurus, it's a big charismatic animal. People love Spinosaurus because of Jurassic Park 3. People hate Spinosaurus because of Jurassic Park 3. It's a very interesting animal. And of course, as we found more fossils of it from this formation, including the 2014 specimen that was described by Ibrahim et al., there's been a lot of debate back and forth about how Spinosaurus would have lived. And there's a lot you can discuss about that.
Plus, also, random thing, I think this just occurred to me. So, if anyone's listening, don't take my word for granted here, because this occurred to me a few seconds ago. I think there's supposed to be plesiosaur teeth found in freshwater deposits there. So, potential freshwater migration by plesiosaurs or just a freshwater species, which would be kind of interesting. But again, to me, this looks like it's just we're talking a lot of partial specimens. It's
Yeah.
in terms of preservation, I don't think this is the same as the dinosaur park. And in terms of diversity, it's probably comparable. From what I'm
But
It's not.
the diversity in Dinosaur Park is like it's the same. It's a very much like a high point
Right.
and one of the best examples of it. But it's the same, largely the same families and groups and types of niches and stuff that you're getting in any other North American Campanian assemblage, which we have a lot of. This little glimpse into mid-Cretaceous African diversity is very one of a kind, though.
Yeah, and I think especially with so many, as much as they might be partial, small taxa, like you're getting a lot of these lizards, you're getting some smaller crocodilians and whatnot. That's something that's pretty unique to have. Plus also again, this wildly rich fish fauna,
Yeah.
right? Like there's so many fish that are found here that are found in reasonably good condition. Ben can correct me, but you're more of a fish guy than I am, so
Yeah, so there's a ton of these isolated lungfish teeth, some of which can get pretty large from there. And also, like what you're saying about plesiosaurs possibly being in fresh water, in Garrisba, there's some teeth of lamniforms like Leptocyrax, Cretotus, Protolamna. These are sharks that are pretty much known as marine taxa, yet they're still somehow being found within this freshwater slash brackish water environment that is the Chem group, which is really interesting. Like you'll find these teeth associated with all of these Onchoprisis and lungfish teeth and all these Spinosaur teeth. And there is a separate Lagerstatt within this formation that has fish, but it also some other stuff that's pretty nice.
Is there a Lagerstatt in the dinosaur park? Because I think whether a formation contains a Lagerstatt is a huge, like that bolsters its odds.
There's multiple as far as I know.
Okay.
there's potentially some feather preservation in a few of the ornithomimids from Dinosaur Park, but I know some of that is debated still, as to whether or not they are actually feathers or if it is just strange preservation types.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to count like a giant Centrosaur death assemblage as a Lagerstatt?
Oh, fair enough.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's
Like I
it's
count it.
a
I think it's cooler than a
concentrate
fish
Lagerstatt.
Lagerstatt. No offense, but
Yeah, I
I
mean, at that point, you're also running into the difference of a preservational Lagerstatt,
yeah,
as far as like great preservation, or a concentration Lagerstatt.
yeah.
I don't think when people talk about Lagerstatts, I think they're thinking about preservational Lagerstatts. I know concentration Lagerstatts are a thing and they exist, but in like the popular human conscious mind, when you're saying Lagerstatt, that's not what anyone's thinking about. They're thinking about preservation, like
Yeah.
Wolfen and stuff. So that's kind of what I meant. Yeah, a preservational Lagerstatt. To be honest, they're tough, but I am kind of leaning Dinosaur Park on this one.
Oh,
What?
sorry. So I grabbed this out of my bookshelf. There's some things. So there are actually freshwater plesiosaurs from Dinosaur Park. That's something. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's a whole chapter in here on freshwater plesiosaurs. That's why I pulled it out because I
Yeah.
remembered reading about it a while ago. They think the idea is that these juveniles would go into the rivers and basically hang out in the rivers until they're large enough to go out in the open water and not get eaten. There's like several specimens. And there was another paper that came more recently about a number of freshwater plesiosaurs from dinosaur from the dinosaur park area. But with the fish, we were talking about the fish earlier. Two things. One is the dinosaur park formation has a lot of these teleosts, like more derived teleosts. And one of the things that said's important is this is one of the periods where you start seeing a very high diversity of these more modern fish groups. But
Mhm.
also, I didn't realize this. There's a partial ray skeleton from the dinosaur park formation.
I've seen
It's
I've seen that before. I didn't know that was Dinosaur Park though. That's interesting. I'm leaning Dinosaur Park on this one for sure.
Yeah, and
I am also.
the plesiosaur from Dinosaur Park is like almost an entire torso and tail. Everything past the neck looks like it's preserved except for three of the four limbs, and it's like it's its own genus and like a valid genus, not just teeth. So, and it's an elasmosaur, which is cool.
Yeah,
I would agree, Dinosaur Park.
Yeah, it's a
I
shame.
mean,
It's a shame that Chem's going out so early.
I will vote for Chem still because I like having a good selection of smaller animals.
well,
However, I fully understand that the dinosaurs of Dinosaur Park are far more charismatic to most people.
Well, there's a lot of little stuff in Dinosaur Park. I mean,
Yeah,
there's lots of tooth beds, lots of these teleosts. There's
a lot of mammals looks like a lot of multituberculates and metatheres.
Yeah, that's kind of when the Metatherians start getting
I mean,
going.
I'll be more specific. It's like I want lizards and crocodilians. I want non-dinosaur reptiles,
There
which there
are
are some,
There's
but I think the other
yeah.
ones are more interesting because you start getting Notosuchians and some of the land crocodilians and stuff.
as
So,
someone with no skin in the dinosaur game, I'm going to be gorilla brained and simple minded about this and say big cool dinosaurs equals cool. So
They both have big, cool
yeah,
dinosaurs.
yeah, that could be both of them still.
more big cool dinosaurs, more complete ones.
Yeah, it's like, Chem also has, I know we were comparing the actual landscape, the Badlands and Dinosaur Park and then the Chem group. They have that really epic, exotic North African, vibe to it too. I know we're not going off of vibes or anything, but if we're going to be comparing
We're
both of the
we are
landscapes,
absolutely going off
are
of
we
vibes.
going off vibes?
We
Okay.
are, yes,
That's
vibes are its
like
own category.
Chem is like you're on a motorcycle making it to the cargo plane that's already like going on the runway, and then there's like two trucks with AKs firing at you, and you have the dinosaur you have the Spinosaur mandible, in your sack. You launch onto the plane, and then it takes off. Bullets are hitting the plane, but you escape. That's like the
Yeah,
Chem group.
yeah,
That's
I
like
hate it.
Lawrence of
I hate it when
Arabia.
that happens. I hate it when AK
Yeah.
wielding militants attack my fossil pig site.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
because I've heard of things too in the at least within I'm not sure if in this specific group, but sort of in that North Africa area, I've heard of people who told me that they've been invited by kings and other heads of state within these like civil war uh ridden countries, and they're like, take us on expedition. We went to go see fossil for my son, and then we will have military escort. And then, there's a lot of crazy, stuff that happens. I know that also with um, Paul Sereno, had there's also a thing
world's
that
most
happened.
handsome man, 1999. Is that right?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, yeah, all of his like epic, work, is
his
out of there or
SVP talk was like his SVP talk was about Niger, but yeah, the first like 15 minutes was like, yeah, so this is how we like had to go about and like hire our mercenary escorts. It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay.
I know that they some people made them dump water one time. Like if some militant, finds you, and instead of like, pointing a gun at you, they'll just have you dump your water out. So they're forcing you to go back to whatever town you're, based out of or village or whatever. So there's lots of crazy stuff like that that's gone on. So Chem has that, exotic adventure, that true. And we always talk about Indiana Jones, but if you're talking about where like an actual Indiana Jones storyline would take place, it would be there. So
Yeah.
it definitely has that, it has that going for it. But uh, we could we'll relate this to other formations, but the American West also, of course, has its own crazy storylines of battles and everything. But Yeah, the ChemCon has that, but just as far as, pure diversity of different taxa, it's like yeah, I would have to go to Dinosaur Park, I think.
Yeah, if this was Cedar Mountain, I'd give it to a Chem, but I think
Yeah.
Dinosaur Park's got Dinosaur Park has also got an Ashdarkid with a really cool name. It's not the 10 pterosaurs from Chem, but Cryodraken is a dub in my.
Yeah.
So
It's
let's
also
think.
the site, I think. No, no, was it the site that those specimens that got sunk to the bottom of the ocean came from? Or I wonder if that's Horseshoe Canyon.
Ooh,
The Sternbergs that went missing with the mummies.
Oh,
Hmm.
Hang
I
on,
think
I'm
yeah.
I
looking it
think
up.
I
I
think
know
you
This
I
is
got
know
gonna
what I
bother
know what
me.
you're talking about. No, I know what you're
well, and
talking
there's a
about.
few of them across the West. I think
Yeah, but the ones that got
Um,
destroyed in World War II.
oh,
Right.
Well,
So it looks like Dinosaur Park is
And
taking the win.
and if they're made out of
It may be Lance Formation, but
all right, what we got next? Hell Creek versus Messel Formation. Okay, this is gonna be interesting.
look at guys, we already know who the John Jones of this thing is.
Hey,
There's no further discussion.
yeah.
We
pause.
know who the goat is.
well,
Yeah, the
Just kidding.
Messel formation.
I do think these ones are interesting
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
they also are only separated
Yeah.
by like 20 million years, but it's such
Mhm.
different ecosystems because what
Yeah,
happens at the top of the
yeah,
Hell Creek.
right.
Okay,
They're a really good comparison, really brilliant, comparison it's like really fascinating. Yeah.
one thing I want to point out. If we open up the Google Doc and we're gonna just consider aesthetics first, the Hell Creek is beautiful. The pictures I have included of the Hell Creek are pictures that like I took or people with me took when I was hanging out with Harry in the Hell Creek. Great Badlands, very similar to Dinosaur Park kind of Badlands. Mesoformation is literally an abandoned trash pit in Germany. Like the metal pit.
Well, I mean, I got
Yeah.
a Google Maps of the Messel. Well, it's okay. It's from one of the stops, but it doesn't have the most. I wish when I had been there, I took more pictures of the overlook. It looks like Ohio, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So like from that, it's the topography and the vibes. I think we got to go with Elk Creek with that one.
Yeah. I want to,
Uh,
if I can tell a story that Harry told me one time. I think I said this in a Discord group chat at some point too. If if you're out in the Hell Creek, you have to cultivate relationships with landowners so that you can get access to the property that has the Hell Creek formation.
contracts,
Huh?
contracts to the property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that means you just have to spend a lot of time in bars, like talking to
Yeah.
old cowboys. And
Yeah.
Harry, do you know where I'm going with this? Do you want
Yeah,
to?
the guy. Well, you had mentioned it before how there's a guy in a bar. This was like what 2022 that you
Something like
saw this guy, and then he's like, "Oh, I saw some T-Rex teeth, and I just kept riding, or something." I forgot. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
yeah,
There was an old cowboy crossing some cattle across a river on his land, and he looks to his side and he sees all these like big T-Rex teeth falling out of the hill, like together, like it was a skull that was tumbling out. But I don't know, it's just some old cowboy. He's just like whatever. He just kept
yeah.
crossing through. That's the most American thing I've ever heard in my life. Like that's
Yeah, yeah. Well, to give the Hell Creek vibes, spiel, it's like where do you start? It's one of the foundations of American science in the sphere of the world, because it wasn't. I mean, there's lots of different elements of the history of science in America, of course, but one pivotal moment was, when you started finding things in the Hell Creek and, of course, the Morrison,
Well,
in the
the
1870s.
Morrison came first.
Yes,
Like,
Morrison came
the
first,
Morrison
and
precedes the Hell Creek in terms of how, like, when it was identified for scientific
yeah,
importance as superior to the European localities that paleontologists had
right,
known
right,
until that point in time.
yeah, yeah,
There was a little bit of Hell Creek action going on in the Bone Wars, but the Bone Wars were mainly fought over.
mainly Morrison, yeah, and then some other
It's not Morrison's turn.
Cenozoic stuff too,
in Niobrara, in marine stuff. It was also in the Niobrara.
yeah,
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 yeah.
but
Leidy was really active in Niobrara.
yeah.
Leidy was all over Like people, Leidy was like the first. Leidy was like Gen 1 American paleontologist.
Hmm.
Yeah, or like Mesozoic paleontologist. Joseph Leidy was his old Civil War doctor, who like all these kind of like in the 18 like late 1860s and early 1870s, right, and throughout the 1870s. Um, the various geologic surveys and like school teachers that were living out west were all sending weird bones they found to Leidy. So Leidy's providing the first descriptions of like the scrappiest remains of animals that would become more famous down the line, like some mosasaurs, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of the ichthyosaurs I work on out in Nevada.
Literally,
Uh,
a fish that I'm working on right now was described by him in 1857.
so let's drink to Leidy.
Yeah.
Because he's I think a pretty underrated part of that story.
But back to the Hell Creek in the meantime, because the Hell Creek, the big name was like Henry Fairfield Osborne, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Barnum
good.
Brown, right?
And
He
Brown.
was he was a civil rights activist. No. And everybody gets that joke, but
Unfortunately, I do. I was reading a book about paleontology in the 1920s, and there's a quote by Osborne in there, and it's like, even for the time, that was very spicy.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good description. Even
Yeah,
for the time, it was
for those who don't know in the
spicy.
audience, who's
Yeah.
not turned on to this little piece of paleontological like lore, Henry Fairfield Osborn was the chairman of the American Museum of Natural History.
He basically created
And
it from
was,
nothing.
and was also like one of the most racist people on the planet.
He was an ardent supporter of eugenics, fascism, and the Nazis, to the point of being the chair of the first American Eugenics Society, the first chair of the American Eugenics Society, and an ardent, outspoken supporter of Hitler, until he actually died a little bit before World War II.
Gotcha.
Holy cow! I didn't know any of that.
Oh yeah, but we have to keep like referring to him, just
Yeah,
Well,
he's the guy who named
he didn't have
Tyrannosaurus
any
and
field
Velociraptor.
yeah,
He
it's
wasn't
like
a field work guy. People's collectors
right.
like Barnum Brown sent him stuff.
And if you didn't perform well
Yeah.
for him, you were disposed of, which means fired. Which I actually have to clarify that for Osborne, which is surprising.
Well, and like
Yeah.
we're sitting here talking about that, but we can also move away from the Hell Creek and instead go to Germany.
Germany to get away from the
The Messel pits in Germany, but it wasn't really found for fossils until the 1970s, so they at least skipped that. And again, like I was saying, these are separated by 20 million years. So in the Hell Creek, you have famous dinosaurs, which I don't know if we've even just said the name Tyrannosaurus Rex yet. Tyrannosaurus Rex?
Yeah,
There you go.
Triceratops, mosasaurs.
Yeah, so I should list a couple because I can't
Yeah.
share my screen since I'm on the phone, but don't worry about it. I got a little bit of a mandible. I just kind of took this to Tyler Leeson in Denver to get it checked out. We have not skin, but we believe, I'll say Tyler, who found Dakota, the Admonosaurus mummy, ironized mummified skin. Maybe I could get a better read on this here. Okay, let's see. So it's kind of hard to see, but
I can see it. Yeah,
maybe you could kind of see that a little bit. So that's part of the mummy that I found. That's like a whole sacral section and some verts and everything too. So hopefully there's more of that specimen. Montosaurus metatarsal. This would be like right metatarsal 3.
I remember
Then
that.
I've done the reconstruction in the middle of it. So Jared's girlfriend PETA found this one, and it was split in two, unfortunately. So I had to do it was like eroded and split in two. We of course have the condygnathids. This is a pedal claw of condygnathed, Hell Creek, and then let's say the fibula of Edmontosaurus, and not even one of the biggest fibulas. It would be kind of like uh, let's say maybe medium size. That it's broken off and eroded. So Jared and I excavated this one, so you still would have had like a lot more of the fibula on there, and had a lot of roots and pyrite rot. For those of you who excavate, and the pyrite oxidation process is almost like this rock disease for mineralized bone, which destroys it. So a lot of it was pyrited. So I had to do some sculpting in between, but Edmontosaurus fibula. And then, of course,
So you're saying Hell Creek
our
is diseased?
yeah. So then we have our Triceratops brow horn here, and so this goes to my Triceratops skull genie that I'm currently preparing. That's probably about 80% or so complete. I have big sections of the frill, both mandibles. I'm missing kind of the nasal horn and both brow horns, or I have both brow horns. Missing the nasal horn and kind of rostral section, but a little bit of the maxilla that I think is going into the site. So I'm gonna have to go this summer and go back to the site and keep excavating it. But has a lot of ironstone concretion surrounded the whole specimen, so it's kind of
That sounds fun,
um,
Brent.
yeah, it's it is. One side is just like mudstone. You blast it right off, and it's like good. And then the other part is all just ironstone. But yeah, so just a little Hell Creek show and tell.
That's so
And then,
cool.
of course, and then the Denversaurus and Kylosaurus and
Yeah,
Kagocephalosaurus.
I love the um notosaurs
Yeah,
in the Hell Creek because they're just kind of
yeah,
rare, but they're still there. And it's just this
yeah,
juicy little piece of diversity. Love them.
yeah.
There's also cool little microsites too that you can find tiny little mammal teeth, troodontid teeth, some erectolobiform carpet shark teeth.
Jared
Yeah.
Also,
looks like he's got something to say.
it's crazy no one's mentioned this yet, and I promise this will be like the last thing it'll be the last thing I say at least before we move on to the Messel. The obvious advantage that the Messel has over the Hell Creek, one would argue, is a Lagerstadt. Guess what? The Hell Creek does have a Lagerstadt. It's the Tannasite. As controversial as it is, you can't deny that it exists, and you also can't deny some people try and deny what it captures, but essentially the Tannasite captures the very last day of the Cretaceous period. It literally captures the day that the asteroid hit the Yucatan Peninsula, and it sent waves up into North America of
Literal waves, like actual tidal waves.
yes, there's literally a turtle impaled by a piece of petrified wood. It was petrified at the time, but the turtle was impaled on wood from
It's a turbidite, so like both earthquake and like tidal wave action turbidite. And this is the thing that that really the little piece of the tannacite that really like kind of gives me chills is the glass tektites,
yes,
the glass
Mhm.
raindrop. It was
yeah.
raining golden glass.
Yeah,
On
I
top
will
of that,
say,
yeah.
Allegedly.
there's a Thescelosaurus leg ripped off the body of a Thescelosaurus and mummified, and like probably just ripped off by wave action or something. Who knows? But yeah, this site is crazy. The only issue with it is it's really, really, really hard for anyone to really get access to it. But nonetheless, it exists, and I'm sure access will open up to a broader array of people within the next few decades. Who knows? As this develops, but it's kind of Tannasite's
Well,
a new thing, and it has a lot of crazy stuff, a lot of fish as well. It is a fish Lagerstadt.
I will say if people are more interested in the background situation of why it's controversial, I do have a video on
Yeah.
that
We should
on my YouTube.
steer clear of that's the specific controversy in this video, I think.
Yeah, it's okay to just talk about the site for now, I think, because otherwise we've
Yeah.
literally like we're going so long already, and we're only on the second.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could go to Messel.
Yeah. Okay. On to Messel.
Before we do that, I don't think we actually said where the Hell Creek is and the age. So for those that don't know, it's Maastrichtian in age. So it's from the last stage of the Cretaceous period.
Yeah.
In Lancian.
Captures the
too.
last days and
Yeah.
And then you get the
ultimate.
yep, and at the very
Final.
top you get the impact as we were talking about with the Tannacite. And then 20 million years later you get the Messel, and this is a book just about the Messel pit.
And is the Eocene of Germany. Just put it out there right in the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, Eocene of Germany about 20 million years later. So where the Hill Creek is kind of 68 to 66 million years old, the Messel pit is about 47 million years old.
The Messel pit preserves a lot of that, or is like our best site in the world for understanding the early not early yes, but early mammal radiation, especially in the small critters. And lots and lots and lots of them are extinct, like completely dead end lineages. but it's also really important for tracing the origins of the mammal groups that comprise most of today's mammal, like
Like you're
most common
getting
mammal groups.
like
And
we're getting some X-rays of various bats, and these are like the earliest bats that had only just evolved echolocation that you're getting in the mesopit, and there's multiple species of those. Additionally, there's the whole fauna list where you have, really importantly for us, early primates.
mm,
And this includes things like Darwinius, which is you look at it and you go, yeah, that looks like a really small primate.
and snakes. The earliest boas are come from the Mesopit.
When you think about boas and pythons today, you're thinking mostly tropical to subtropical species, but because of the climate in the Eocene, as Greenland was breaking away from North America, there was a lot of CO2 released. So it was this really warm period in Earth's history. So you actually do get
It's
kind of
the
a
warmest period in its history.
yeah.
Yeah.
In
So you get a
in
subtropical
And this is right at the
Germany.
maximum too.
Yeah.
Yep. So you get subtropical Germany, which is not necessarily what you would expect most of the time. So you also get crocodilians from there. Um, you get the earliest horse and rhino relatives. So you're getting a really good spread of a lot of various animals that otherwise we don't have great fossils of in the Eocene. There's a few places where sure they do exist, but at this point, this is one of the best places for finding a lot of these organisms. You also have a lot of birds, including parrot relatives that are still carnivorous as opposed to seed eating. So you get some very interesting animals from the Mesopit.
Yeah, I think you
So
have to show us some more of the fossils themselves because that's really what sells this formation.
they're
The
really
fossils
beautiful.
are
So
absurd.
here's the
Yeah.
skull of Darwinius, where you can see the kind of more primate teeth. There's
Yeah.
one of these. Again, we're still on Darwinius.
Find the
Let's go back to the Darwinius
leptictinian.
page.
And for our listeners who
I will
are
get there, yeah.
spent their childhoods rewatching the same paleo documentaries like we did, some of us did. The Walking with Beasts BBC documentary episode, New Dawn, the very first one, is looking at like almost all the fauna from there is from the Mesopit.
Yes. And
Is,
one very lost Ambulocetus.
Very lost Ambulocetus.
is that original color on that beetle? Is
Yeah.
that
Yes.
Yeah, that's the structural color of this beetle.
dude? That's insane.
So a comment I've heard about the Mesopit specifically was this is probably the most complete ecosystem we have in the fossil record anywhere. Specifically because we have close to the entire fauna because it's sampling a lot of the like, Green River ends up being very biased because the shoreline fauna is not very well represented. The Mesopit, because it was basically a pond back in the Eocene, you get this huge diversity of insects and smaller faunas, and you can really reconstruct the ecosystem with a lot more detail than almost any other ecosystem, full stop, in Earth's history.
Well, and really importantly, because of the way it was formed, you get these really great like freeze frames of specific times. Because what it
Oh, there's
seems
like
like to me,
seasonal. You can see the individual years
yeah,
in in the shale. Like you can
in the
actually
vars,
measure
yeah.
year by year.
But my what I was going to get to is, A, you also have plants here, which is fantastic because normally you get either plants and vertebrates, but normally not both. So this is great for doing that with this ecosystem as well. But also really importantly, it freezes these things because what it seems like happened is this region of southern Germany, I think southern Germany, I think this is by Stuttgart, if I'm correct. I might be wrong.
I'm pretty sure.
Regardless, this region of
Yeah, it's
Germany,
by Stuttgart.
yeah, this region of Germany was very volcanic at this time, but not like, big towering mountains erupting volcanic, but just lighter activity. So what it seems like happened is in this depression, there was a volcanic sink underneath it that was releasing a lot of gas as the magma was interacting with other rocks, especially a lot of carbonates. So when you think about rocks, sometimes they have carbonates in them. As the lava touches that, it chemically changes them. So there's a lot of CO2 coming out. Occasionally, as these faults and things would shift around, it would release this CO2 into the bottom of the water. So that's why you're getting the wonderful preservation. As larger eruptions and disturbances happened, that CO2 would just plume out and just kill whatever was over the lake and just drop it straight in to be preserved.
There's a similar thing today in I want to say it's in Africa where these lakes will just spit out huge amounts of CO2 that just kill everything in their path.
Yeah, I believe that's Lake Nyos is the famous occurrence of that.
Yeah.
But there was a recent study that was looking at the number of bats found in the Messel pit versus just like how many bats end up in pools. And it's like, yeah, no, there's a statistically abnormal number of bats in the Messel pit.
There's like 17 turtles that died in the middle of making more turtles in the Messel pit.
That is true. And interestingly, the turtles that they are also known for their modern representatives to breathe through their skin. So it's like, yeah, no, they probably were like up at the top, and as they were in the act, sank down further and then hit the toxic water where all that CO2 was and just couldn't escape.
Right.
Is that this one? Yeah, I think this should be this one.
This is hard.
Yeah.
Like Ben and I.
No, it's not.
There it is. Yeah, right there. There's several of them.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to show more of those colored insects too. Like I'm still astounded by some of them.
I'm not sure if all of those are easily available.
I think if you just look it up on.
Oh, they have the giant. Yeah, they have the giant ants Titanomyrma. So basically, during the early Eocene, there was this radiation of giant ants that spread throughout much of the northern continents, and we have no idea what they're doing. The problem is we have mandibles from them, and they're mostly known from alates or princess ants like this. The problem is we have their mandibles, and the mandibles could be either one of two dietary habits. Either they're carnivorous, similar to a driver ant, or they're ones that spit formic acid, similar to some of these other ants, who's like a leaf cutter more. The morphology is ambiguous enough that it could be like a non-carnivorous species that uses formic acid as a defense or something.
Yeah.
Which is not very helpful for its habits, and it's kind of, dampens the enthusiasm of giant hummingbird-sized, driver ants, but
that's crazy. Yeah, I honestly, if not for the Tannocite existing, I think Messel would win, not easily, but you just have, in my opinion, I'm more interested in the Hell Creek fauna. Like the fauna during the Eocene is interesting, but it's just it's not as alien as Hell Creek fauna is,
But I think that's part of why the Messel is so interesting to me, is because sure, you're starting to get like all of these, very common groups, like, we have pangolins, we have primates, we have relatives of horses and rodents and things, but it's the first time they're showing up in decent numbers, and there's still weird things like Leptoctidium, right? Like
there is also
Leptoctidium is just a strange thing.
There's also Buxelistes, which is this weird otter-looking thing that we have no idea what it is. It's like some kind of weird Cretaceous leftover that's kind of evolved into an otter mimic.
Yeah.
But T-Rex.
Yeah. T-Rex is other places too.
T-Rex is honestly a vote against the Hell Creek. Like that actually.
I disagree. I fully disagree.
Listen, I tell you what, if Tyrannosaurus, if T-Rex was cool, it would have been Allosaurus.
Whoa,
that's true.
Wow, Ezekiel, that's how.
I just have one specific friend who's going to appreciate that comment. That's all.
How can you say something that's so brave and yet so true?
My thoughts exactly. Thank you, Reverend Engelman.
Here's what I'm thinking.
The fact. Go ahead.
The hell,
you walked into a trap, man.
That's right. We'll bite our way out of that with our strong metatarsals and bite force and binocular vision that clowns Allosaurids.
Ooh, that's true.
Yeah,
Clown.
but so somehow Allosaurs managed to live longer.
Geologically,
no,
lifespan.
We have lifespan data for some of the Carcharodontosaurids, and it looks like the Allosaurs, despite picking fights with sauropods, somehow managed to regularly live into their 60s.
Yep.
I mean, I guess.
Well, and I think also,
and they didn't skip arm day.
I was going to say, when you think about it just from a statistical standpoint of which ones were the dominant predators for longer, statistically, more Allosaurs ate Tyrannosauroids than Tyrannosauroids ate Allosaurs.
Yeah, and like
right, because they were smaller. The Jurassic.
Allosauria is like in terms of like which group of animals. I mean, kind of the rank the hierarchical ranking out like if we're comparing different hierarchical ranking groups, it's not exactly fair. But allosaurs were the dominant predators on both hemispheres for like every continent had a giant allosaur for like 60 to 70 million years. That's an unprecedented and unrivaled uh, amount of time as kind of the dominant apex predator.
I would like to say that tyrannosaurs ended up in the position they were in for a reason, and to say that like, oh, more allosaurs ate tyrannosauroids than the other way around. It's like saying, like,
Yeah, the Tyrannosaurs had
wait,
to literally wait for the Carcharodontosaurs and Allosauroids to go extinct before they could do anything. They had to
no,
wait
I,
for
That
they had to
I
wait
disagree.
for the
That's like
people in
saying
charge to die.
that's like saying if I was that hypothetical allosauroid, that's like saying, oh yeah, I could beat up John Jones when he was a baby.
So didn't
Yeah.
Andrea Cow say in one of
Exactly
suggest in one of
right.
his papers the only reason the tyrannosaurs actually managed to do anything in the latest Cretaceous is because they were the only they were the only carnivorous non-maniraptoran theropods left after the allosaurs and ceratosaurs mostly died in the northern hemisphere.
Dude,
Yeah, and that
it's
tracks with some other data that's going to be coming out in a bit.
it took
Hush,
a
hush.
literal
I'm
Mount
very interested in this data, Zeke.
it took a literal Mount Everest sized meteor to take out T-Rex. It did not take anything like that to take out the allosaurs. I'm just saying.
I
But
think that this is a
Right.
debate that should be had for the potential Hell
Yeah,
Creek.
yeah.
Yeah,
When the Morrison faces off with the Hell Creek, that's when we'll
Yeah,
do
because
that.
we right now
yeah.
T-Rex is facing some boas and some insects and some fish and early mammals.
And a lemur.
yeah,
Hey,
but
listen,
Yeah.
say what you will. I know which one I like. My vote's on the Messel because I,
I'm
I
going
like those
Messel
things
too.
more.
And so the Hell Creek, you have phenomenal stuff. You have really big dinosaurs, but the quality of Messel, the fact that you get coloration, that you get this huge diversity, and the preservation is so good, I think that the Messel takes the cake.
you get the literal day that the meteor impact happened in the Hell Creek. Like the day it happened with turtles that were impaled on trees from a tidal wave. That's the coolest thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, come on. How
I
can you
mean, is it,
But
well,
it's
the other
the
thing is too,
most
is that NASA is doing collaborative research with the TANIS team too. So there's a lot more of a profound existential, you could say, if we could
Well, I'm
use
sorry. I
that kind
think
of
I think
side.
NASA
It-
has a little bit too many ties with the Germans already to try and do more work with
yeah,
them.
yeah, right,
Uh,
yeah, right. Yeah. Well, don't you mean the Germans have too many ties to the Germans?
true?
Since NASA is the German is the or the Germans, but or at least were. But yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of like, and I'll kind of always list like more of the outside cultural things since what I do, with my content creation, I'm always trying to do cinematography and storytelling. With the Hell Creek, there is a tremendous pop culture influence. There's an influence on how humanity started to see its place in geologic history, how amazing and the amazing amount of kinds of creatures that evolution could create. Which it was something that really ingrained itself into the minds of people, I think. And then it encompasses the most monumental impactful singular day, you could say, on record. The fact that we have a deep impact that's one day, uh, and that's a very much of a, again, going back to the existential side, a very kind of like world altering thing. It has very much a world altering thing that led to our evolution eventually. Of course, iconic blockbuster species. I know as researchers we don't want to, tap into that, but the Hell Creek certainly has that angle pretty much locked down. And one other thing I kind of like is I think in my introduction, I'm sorry, I know we got to keep going, but I didn't talk about my own research. So I'm doing research on the things that I discover. And I guess I could say Jared discovered one of these turtles. So Jared and our other friend Mac, when we were out there uh, prospecting, they came across two Hell Creek turtles. So I'll be doing some descriptions and scanning and publications on those with some other colleagues. And so I'm kind of excited for that. But there's a preservation bias in the Hell Creek where you have more of the large-bodied animals. Sure, you have conognathids, you have dromaeosaurs,
And
you
some like
have
isolated like micropaleo areas within that because
yes,
it's not a terrible mammal record either.
right, right. I
The
mean, you
mammals are
got
interesting.
Alphodon, Didelphodon, Chimolestes. You got like a lot of kind of different mammals,
There's
and then
deltathoridians there. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
yeah, yeah, uh, and so I kind of like that there's a preservation bias because it leaves some mystery still to be found for someone who goes out and excavates on different, private leases and everything. I do
And
kind of like
see,
that. I
that's the
like
kind of
that
thing
element
that
of mystery.
and that's the kind of thing where I'm like, no, I'm the opposite. I like the Messel formation because it has so
Well,
much of that detail to be able to build out an entire ecosystem
well, part of the
and
reason Hell
understand it.
Creek is so like famous and important is because it's also the most like receives the most attention and resources and effort to understand it.
For a reason.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's a
The
bit of a
reason is,
positive feedback cycle that's
Yeah.
um
and the
Because
reason
it's
is
because
just
donors
just
like
put
Hidden
Reason is actually
Dinosaur.
Osborne. Some of that's Osborne's fault because he
just
really
put
promoted
yeah,
the heck out of
and
it.
really if you think about it, the Hell Creek is racist. So
it's
Wait, what?
um
tyrannical. It's tyrannical. There's no
yeah.
democracy, right? It's a
Yeah.
Um
I-
if you just write T-Rex into your grant, it automatically gets approved.
boom.
And that's the
Do you
thing
guys
though,
remember
right?
the
When
abstract
I
from
do
like
my
a few
Fidus,
years ago that kind of like had all the paleontologists get the knives out for each other because someone said the quiet part out loud about T-Rex?
no.
oh, I think that was Rob Gaze, maybe. I
No,
think
no,
Rob
it was
Gaze
the it
proposed
was
it.
I'm trying to remember who it was. It was Henry Sharp and Denver someone.
Denver
They're very
Fowler?
nice. They were SVP. It was SVP. It was the SVP Cincinnati. And there was a lot of discussion because it basically said the quiet parts out loud about how some paleontologists are more equal than others, and the ones who are more equal tend to be the ones who study tyrannosaurs. And it got a lot of people very
Mm.
upset.
And I think that's going to come down as well to a big fundamental debate that we'll have throughout this episode, which is the big things equal cool aspect, which has
Yeah.
been brought up
Yeah.
in this podcast before, but naturally people will gravitate towards the T-Rexes and the Triceratopses over these incredibly preserved insects and early mammals and snakes and things like that, even though the preservation of Messel in my opinion, completely topples Hell Creek. Just the aspect of the big things equals cool is what can
Mhm.
propagate the Hell Creek to receive far more press and attention and possibly votes in this episode over the Messel.
Awesome.
Right. So it looks like we have two for Messel and two for Hell Creek, with Russell and Cole left over for voting.
All right. Russell, I'll let you go first.
You go first.
Okay, so it's in my best interest to vote for Messel. However, because I'm an honorable person, and because I think it will keep the video more interesting if Hell Creek is in the bracket for longer, I think I'm going to go.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So I'm going to vote for Hell Creek, but not for the reason most people might think. I'm going to vote for Hell Creek specifically because of the large amount of Cretaceous microfauna and because the interest of like this is a very detailed snapshot into what the small fauna was doing right before the mass extinction. So like the mammals, the lizards,
And
all
after the Mass the Hell Creek preserves post
Yes, that's it. Yep.
KPG mammal
Yeah.
birds,
yeah,
mammal fossils.
Yeah.
I will
Tyrannosaurus
also
can
say,
officially pound sand.
as much as I have talked, I will say also, as much as I've talked about like the primates and stuff, uh, there is still Purgatorius in the Hell Creek potentially, so
Yeah.
potentially the first mammal
Yep.
there. I don't
There
know if that's in
is.
Hell Creek or just
It
overlying,
is.
but
Yeah. 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 It is.
All right, on to the next one.
Notorious.
Is the Santa Cruz Formation versus the Balfour Formation?
So I looked up Santa Cruz is the one I was the least familiar with. I looked up the Santa Cruz right before we got on and started filming, and I didn't reckon there was a very long list of taxa, and I didn't recognize a single one. There is, however, an animal called homunculus in the Santa Cruz Formation, which is I'm not sure how I feel about that, but it did
It's a
stick out.
monkey. It's one of Amagino's. He thought that it was an ancestral human, and it's not. It's a very weird high latitude monkey that seems to be specialized for feeding on very abrasive foods because it's up really. So The Santa Cruz Formation is a locality in the very southern tip of South America. And it's a locality that even during the Miocene, it was still at the southern tip of South America. And the thing is, yes, in the Miocene, it's much warmer than today, but in terms of sunlight and daylight hours, it still effectively was almost at the Antarctic Circle. So it's this very weird ecosystem that doesn't exist today because it's being affected both by like this really high latitude like seasonal cycle, but it's still warm all the year round. So the monkeys there, they can't feed on fruit all the year round, so they seem to be switching to eating very abrasive vegetation to survive.
Is the Santa Cruz Formation the one that has the terror birds in it?
Yeah, there's several. That's the one where the first terror birds are from is Santa Cruz. The really big one, Kalinkin, is the formation like immediately above Santa Cruz. Pretty much so with the exception of Thylacophilus, if you think of most of the stuff from like South America, it's coming from Santa Cruz. Like Forest Raucus is from Santa Cruz. This is from Santa Cruz. This is a carnivorous marsupial boar hyena. This is from Santa Cruz. This is a complete skeleton of Homalodotherium, which is it's a extinct southern ungulate from South America. This one's at the Field Museum. This is from Santa Cruz. This is a complete skeleton of an Astrapothere, which is another extinct ungulate group. They're kind of possibly hippo-like, but no one's actually done the legwork to show it.
Real quick, Russell, actually, you were talking about these South American ungulates. Do you want to talk about the Sanus?
Well, so the Sanus are this group of South American ungulates. They seem to have basically snuck into South America this very narrow period of time between the meteor impacting at the end of the Cretaceous and the rest of the Cenozoic, because there's like maybe a 2 million year period where things would get in and out of South America and then it stopped. So once the meteor hit, basically everything in South America got sterilized. None of the mammal fauna, with very few exceptions, seems to have survived. So you have this seed fauna of North American migrants that include early ungulates, marsupials, and probably protozoonarthrans, but we don't know. We haven't had any evidence of them yet. And they're basically stuck there for about 60 million years doing whatever they want. So they evolve in all these weird directions. So like you can see here, you can look up here up at the upper right. You can see how huge the roots of these teeth are, and they go almost all the way through the upper and lower jaws because most of them have all the teeth in the jaw grow perpetually like rodents do.
Wow.
And like this is also a Santa Cruz specimen. Like there are these, like you get these almost complete skeletons of all these mammals that have pretty much the only things in the Santa Cruz Formation that have anything related to them alive today are, let me think, it's the armadillos and the sloths. Everything else doesn't have it. Even like there aren't even any opossums in the Santa Cruz Formation. All the marsupials are weird extinct groups.
Yeah, and Santa Cruz is a great teaching thing for the term ecomorph or the concept of ecomorph.
Right.
Like you could have hippopotamorphs. It's not related to a hippo, but you have all these mammal groups that do, fill similar ecologies. So it's kind of a good teaching tool in that sense too, and a point towards Santa Cruz.
Right. So there's been some debate over how much it affected the discovery of evolution, because we know Darwin actually stopped in Santa Cruz and he poked around the Santa Cruz beds a bit and collected some notoungulate remains. Though really right, but the Toxodon he found is a Pleistocene one, which is from like the last 10,000 years. So the Toxodons from Santa Cruz, this is an earlier fauna, so the Toxodons are only about the size of they're like maybe 500 kilos versus 3,000, like more cow-sized and rhino-sized. They still get big, but this is actually the Santa Cruz fauna is actually one of the first faunas in the South American evolutionary history where the Toxodontids show up for the first time. Most of the notoungulates before that are kind of more like sheep-sized and sheep-like.
I didn't know the preservation was so good. That's really cool. What about the Balfour? So the Balfour Formation, it's this South African formation in the Karoo. And is it Permian or Triassic? I don't remember.
Yes.
It is exactly along the worst extinction in Earth's history. Worse than the KPG.
Cool. The Karoo is possible. The Karoo preserves the entire stratigraphic section, starting in the early, kind of early to mid Permian, all the way to the lower Jurassic. And this is one of the most fossiliferous assemblages within the Karoo supergroup and units within the Karoo supergroup, and it preserves all of the And it's preserving that transition from the latest Permian to the early Triassic. So in the Balfour, you have lots of synapsids, lots of dicynodonts. Um, you especially have the biggest organopsids.
Yeah, like
Uh,
Inostrancevia is
yeah.
one of those really large ones.
And not rutabagia, sorry, Rubidagea, which is like the really big organopsid. You have the Permian lystrosaurs are all from the South African Permian lystrosaurs are all from the Balfour, of large diversity of these kind of latest Permian stuff.
That's cool.
When the first paleontologists were coming out here to look at various fossils, when they got to the Triassic section, there were so many Lystrosaurus that reportedly they started just destroying some of them because they were getting frustrated at finding them so often. Which, now that people have done more taxonomy on them, there's more species and they probably destroyed some useful stuff, which is unfortunate.
There it goes.
But again, this is the worst extinction in history. So you got to think on land. I think it's estimated that 75% of life on land died out and up to 96% of life in the oceans. Um, so when you're looking at what is happening across this, you're getting into a lot of these, very synapsid dominated faunas with a few exceptions like the Parasaurs. And then this extinction happens. You still have some of those synapsids like Lystrosaurus hanging on, a handful of the smaller Theracephalians. But
Proterosuchus.
but exactly, you're getting into like Proterosuchus and more archosauriform things, which would then evolve into crocodilians and of course the dinosaurs. So it's preserving, it is one of the best places for preserving this very important time in Earth's history where things changed so drastically because basically everything died,
So
right? Like
if
it's insane to think of how destructive that was.
I
if
got kind of a cool. Sorry, go ahead, Jared.
no, if you got one more detail to add, go on because I have a question to kind of just start comparing the two. But if you have
Okay,
detail,
well, yeah, just one other thing, yeah, because around the Eastern Cape, there's also some Triassic formations too, and it was cool. I got an email like a couple months ago from a guy who has a ranch in the Eastern Cape. He sent me these theropod footprint, pictures, and he's like, "What is this? What kind of tracks are these on my grandpa's land?" And then they happen to be some sort of like Dilophosaur like theropod dinosaur. So it was kind of cool
Brontes
that
type things or
yes, you brought yep, that's what it was.
I'm pretty sure the same guy DM'd me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
our group chat, they were set in some beautiful ripples, right?
Yes.
Same guy DM'd me, and I was trying to hook him up with some researchers who would be interested in it, and he eventually did find someone, which is good. I was very glad.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
That was out near the Drakensberg Mountains, just west of Lesotho. Yeah.
Yes.
If,
The Lady Gray Mountains in Eastern Cape.
oh, maybe we're
That's
talking about
it.
people.
Maybe it's
Yeah.
just a different South African guy asking about footprint. I mean, they got him there. Yeah, they got him
Mhm.
there. So anyway, but yeah, sorry. So just I share that's kind of a cool. This area that we're talking about is yes, right on that Triassic, on that border.
Plus, if we're going to talk about vibes, the southern tip of South America is really cool. I'd love to go, but I have been to the Karoo.
South Africa. Right.
Sorry, southern tip of South America. So the Santa Cruz is
Oh, for
really,
the Santa Cruz. Okay, sorry.
but
We were on the cruise. So.
yeah, I know.
Mm.
The Karoo is really cool. I've been to South Africa because my family is South African, and so while visiting family there, we spent some time in the Karoo, and it feels a little bit like Wyoming. It's very very rural and lots of sheep farming and almost kind of a Wild West vibe. So if we're just going to talk about vibes, it does have
Yeah, South Africa is this really interesting, like South African like history from the 1800s is this like very kind of strange mirror of the American Wild West.
Mhm.
Like the wildlife is cooler and the accents are dumber.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is a Google Maps picture. I am 90% sure this is actually one of the major localities they collect stuff at because it looks like one of them that they figure in some of these books. But they collect them from these huge cliffs off the Atlantic coast. And basically, you come down here, you have to get the fossils out, and then rush back up before low tide. It's kind of like the Bay of Fundy. But at the same time, also down there at Santa Cruz, that whole part of Argentina is all, again, like you say with South Africa, it's like the Wild West. There's all these ranches out there. A lot of these sites are actually named after the local ranches where they've gotten like local permission to dig. Um, like in Argentina, all fossils are inherently owned by the state, so but you still have to get permission to go poking around someone's land.
Mhm.
But you do get kind of these spectacular views. So you get the Badlands of Patagonia, but you also get these really spectacular maritime cliffs.
And do we have pictures of the Balfour to compare?
In the Google Docs, yes. Yeah.
There you go. I mean, you can see where it's, plains and dry and whatnot. That's where a lot of fossils are found. So,
There's elephants and lions hanging around.
I mean, depending on what part you're in, they've also been extirpated in large parts of South Africa. So, um, but I think that does give the Santa Cruz a little bit of a boost having a more interesting geological or geographical profile as opposed to being like, you're going to a desert again.
Yeah.
So,
I think, okay, if we're going to compare them objectively, it sounds like they have similar preservation. So they both have excellent preservation.
Well, I mean, the Santa Cruz is obviously going to have better preservation. It's a Cenozoic
yeah,
formation. Like it's just going to have better preservation.
yeah,
So that's
there's not been
like
as much time for everything to get
fair
smushed.
point to compare the two.
It just sounds like the fauna that are found in the Balfour are a little more not significant. It's just the fact that it captures the end
time. Yeah,
is,
the time period it captures.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's all the classic Permian animal. Like, when you think of like the Permian period, what exists in the minds of people when they think about that, most of in terms of the late Permian, it's all right there in the Balfour.
Going off of that, then Hell Creek wins. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
Just kidding.
we'll get there.
So what are you guys thinking for voting?
Yes, Balfour. I concur with that last sentiment that Balfour.
Yeah, I do think that
It's-
just because of the significance of what it captures for this extinction.
The
You
same
can look at marine sediments and see the extinction, but this is one of the best places, or if not the only places, to see the continuous record of the worst extinction in history on land.
Esoteric marine invertebrate assemblages.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I think I would rather, like, if I had to go prospecting and try and look for fossils, I think I'd rather visit the Santa Cruz, but that's only because it's geographically interesting, and I've already been to South Africa. Like, I've already been to the Karoo. That's already off my bucket list. I think that's the only thing in the Santa Cruz. But so objectively, if I just have to say which fossils are more impactful and can teach us more about Earth's history, it's probably the Balfour. And I think I'm also voting Balfour then.
What do you think, Russell?
Balfour is fine with me.
Yeah, I'm very much. This extinction is so interesting to me, so I'm also going to go with that.
So I think, I agree. So I think that gets a clean sweep.
I didn't expect that. I predicted Santa Cruz was going to win. That's crazy.
Yeah, I predicted Santa Cruz as well. Our next one is the Chadron Formation versus the Chinle Formation.
Dude, this is so hard. Can I give a quick just?
No, it's not. The Chinle wins.
No, it's
I'm
not.
already all in.
The Chadron wins.
Wait. Okay, the Chadron Formation. You may think, oh, I've never heard of that. Yes, you have. That's the White River Group. So the White River Formation, like we've decided that since the White River Formation is split into two units, the Chadron at the bottom, or three, my bad. The Chadron at the bottom, and then the Brule Formation above it. The Chadron has the entelodonts and the rhinos, whereas the Brule, though it has slightly more fossils, I don't think it has any rhinos in it. And
so the rhinos are more abundant in the Brule. The only real major difference for the people watching this are the Chadron has the Brontotheres. They go extinct at the end of the Chadron, and the Brule is completely Brontothere free. Everything else, there's similar enough things between the two, unless you want to talk about like rodents.
Yes, sorry, my bad. It was Brontotheres. I'm having a brain fart. But okay, so that's the Chadron. So the Chadron is Oligocene mammals. You're in Wyoming. It has its own national park. That's Badlands National Park. So if you need a picture, everything you need about the White River Formation, it's that. Let's go to the Chinle. The Chinle also has its own national park. It also has its own Badlands. So the Chinle Formation is Petrified Forest National Park. They could have called it something else too because it's full of other fossils besides just the forest, and it's Triassic in age. And so just objectively, in terms of their lithology, I don't know if anyone's going to bring up the Google Doc showing the Badlands, but they both have beautiful Badlands. The Chinle Formation is basically just a red version of the White River Badlands.
Red and blue.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of logs everywhere.
Yes. So like here's the White River. You can see the chadron right in the middle in that left picture, how they designate it there. And so Badlands National Park captures the Oligocene White River Formation, whereas the Chinle is Triassic in age. That outcrops in like Arizona, and it's just red and blue and crazy looking. And the other thing that makes them just so dang even and hard to choose is they both have their own very famous deathbed. So the White River Formation, or the White River Group, Chadron Formation, whatever, it has the Great Pig Dig, which is just this entelodont deathbed and has a bunch of other stuff that I'm sure you guys know more about than I do. Whereas in the Chinle Formation, you have Ghost Ranch, which is this Coelophysis deathbed. It's actually the top photo that I chose to show the Chinle Formation. And yeah, they're about as neck and neck as I think any of these formations can possibly get with each other. It is going to be hard to choose one.
There's also Placerius deathbed in Chinle, right?
And there's some
Placerius one as well.
Metoposaur deathbeds in Chinle as well.
Yep, there was a time where I was searching with some other people out at Petrified Forest, not at Petrified Forest, but some of the people from there, and it's like, oh, there goes there's an exploded Metoposaur head, because they just happen to a lot of the time have poor preservation. Other times they have wonderful preservation, but I think it was Bill Parker said the terms of, oh, there's a Metoposaur that ate a grenade because it was just blown to smithereens by erosion.
How do you spell that? What?
They're like
Metoposaur? It's Anaschisma is the genus. Give me a minute.
the names have changed like 3 times in the last 10
But
years.
Anaschisma is currently correct.
Right.
This is from so this is one of the ones that's actually from Petrified Forest. It was initially named off of fossils from the Popogi Formation in Wyoming, but then they found better ones in Petrified Forest, and I think it was Brandon Gee, whoever it was, who's a temnospondyle worker, was like, hey, these are the same animal. So instead of being Coscinodon, this is now Anaschisma perfectus.
It was Butynaria for a while too, but that name's not really.
Well, and these ones are really interesting too, because we also have Apachesaurus, which is the juveniles. So we have a good growth pattern for these ones, where you have the Apachesaurus fossils, and then this is still one was Coscinodon, but yeah, that's kind of what you're looking at for just these amphibians. And then of course you also have your really large Smiloseuchids. So I'm gonna just go to Smiloseuchus. We'll just use this because it's great. You're getting these really big, not crocodilians, but phytosaurs. So they have a couple of different traits. It's still a little debated as to where they fall in the tree, but they're at least close to crocodilians. And
But independently developed the croc thing.
Yes, that is correct. Because crocs at this point were basically on land. If you're looking up here, this is where the nose is going to be.
So the American Museum specimen.
Yeah. So you're going to have the nostrils up here as opposed to way down at the tip of the snout, the way that you get in crocodilians. Also, I'm representing this on my shirt as well.
I heard that the Chinle Formation is a little bit difficult to prospect, as in, like, it's just vast areas of barren strata, and then suddenly you walk up to like a phytosaur skull or something.
There's a ton of stuff in the Chinle. I mean, it's world famous for petrified wood. There is a ton of that, and it's beautiful. Hence, Petrified National Forest. The place that I've went, there was phytosaur and metoposaur teeth just like scattered everywhere. It was pretty abundant. There's really interesting stuff too. I mean, like we said before, there's early dinosaurs like Coelophysis. We also see some of the last instances
Well, the other thing with the Chinle though is these things don't all occur in the same level. Like it's
Yeah.
in the Norian, but the Norian spans like 15, 20 million years.
Yeah.
Like
Well, and there's some
Coelophysis is very high in the Chinle, and most of these things that we're talking about are much lower.
Yeah, so I mean, you do also get that where you start getting some of the first real dinosaurian faunas in North America, whereas earlier they would have had a lot of poposaurs and pseudosuchians, which are more crocodilian type relatives.
Most Placerius come from the Blue Mesa as well. Like that Placerius death assemblage is from pretty
I
low.
think it's Sonsela now is what they're considering when I've talked to people, because I'm doing some digs out by St. John's, and we're in the Sonsela, and I think we think we're roughly equivalent.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
and that's another thing is there's a lot of microfossil sites that are being worked on in the Chinle Formation. So we're starting to find some really interesting things, like some of the first modern amphibians. So some of the first frogs and some of the first uh what are the weird amphibians that are still alive? The
Sicilians.
Caecilians. Yeah, the Caecilians, which are these weird worm-like amphibians. The oldest ones known are from the Chinle Formation. And before this microsite was found, their total fossil record of them was maybe about 30 individuals, most of which were pretty small microfossil sites. Now, because of this site, they've single-handedly taken that number to over 100 Caecilians in the fossil record, just because they're so abundant there.
Yeah, and that
Uh,
kind of brings me to what I was saying. So with the microfossils, there's one of the last instances of what's called the xenocants, which are these Paleozoic holdovers that were really common in the Permian and Carboniferous, which are these freshwater elasmobranchs. They're kind of eel-like in shape, but we get Moriodontis morii, which is in the Chinle Formation, which is one of the last, if not the last occurrence of coelacanths before they become extinct completely. So you get those Paleozoic holdovers, which I find is really fascinating.
and also some of the first turtles are coming from this formation. Um, the first true turtles as opposed to like maybe stem turtles, because a lot of turtle taxonomy is still debated. Um, yeah, and then you're getting where was it? You just saw it, I thought. Megasaurus, Suchians, there we go. So you get also again these large crocodilian relatives that are walking on land being the top predators before the dinosaurs really start to take over during
Yeah,
the
that's very cool.
Jurassic. So Postosuchus is great. I love Postosuchus.
Is Postosuchus actually found in the Chinle itself? Or
Yes,
Yes.
I have seen the fossils to say so.
okay, because I'm pretty sure Postosuchus comes from Texas, from the Docu
Yeah,
group.
the best fossils of it do come from the Dockum. It is also found in the Chinle.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Plus, I had to shout out Texas a little bit. Okay, so I realized that we have a lot of Arizona guys in here too, so the Chinle's gonna get hyped up. But
Yeah, it is.
the the White River, I wish we had like Madison Shrero in here or something, because she actually like works with that stuff, and I don't know too much about it.
I
But
do. Or what do you need me to, what do you need information on?
oh, well then perfect.
We
I
have a medical guy.
try and point out its pros. For example, the fact that
Well,
mammal sites are just kind of rare globally, and then you get the White River, which is just full of oligocene mammals.
oh, there's so many fossils. There's so many fossils that you're almost literally tripping over them in some places. There's so many fossils that like they leave well-preserved skulls behind because it's not worth collecting all of them.
Hmm.
Like these Oreodont skulls, they call them prairie potatoes, just because they're so common that you just hit them all the time.
Yeah.
You have these early like they're these pseudo saber-tooths like the Nemravids, like you're showing here. This is also one of the very first North American fossil formations that was prospected. Like Leedy prospected here, and he almost half this stuff is named by Leedy.
Wow.
As the Brontotheres, which are these large like pseudo rhino things. It
Yeah,
has
the Titanotheres.
yeah, it has these carnivorous ungulates like the Entelodonts. It has three-toed horses. It's one of the best sites for early horses. And they're horses that are obviously horse-like. They're not like just vague mammal-shaped blobs like some of the Eocene ones, but they're still not modern horses, which is very strange.
Mhm.
I like the Oreodonts. So the Oreodonts, for people who don't know, they're this group of like possibly stem camels. Like they may be stem camels, they may be stem ruminants, but they're totally extinct, and they just showed this bizarre range of diversity. There is so much morphological and functional diversity in them, more than almost any other ungulate group, and they're just really bizarre. Like, they look kind of sheepy, but there's like some of them that are more rabbit-like. There's some that are
Mhm.
semi-aquatic. We don't have any of the semi-aquatic ones in the Shadron specifically. Leptauschinea is one of these jackrabbit-like ones. Mericoidodon and Miniocharis are the more sheepy ones. We don't get this specific genus in the Shadron or the White River group, but right above that there is one called Mesoriodon that appears to have a fused voice box them into a howler monkey, so they're probably making very, very loud noises. But then there's like rhino-like ones, peccary-like ones. They get more diverse later on in the Oligocene, but this is when they first start really diversifying.
And
There's camels, lots of camels.
I would like to point out, I think the preservation in the White River is better, if I'm not mistaken. Like, preservation is good in both, but the preservation in the White River is like really impressive.
Again, it's a Cenozoic assemblage versus a Triassic assemblage.
Right, but
Yeah,
I mean, if we're
you're
going by that stand, oh man, my camera's off. We're going to have to disqualify every single Cenozoic fauna just because it's more recent and the things are more similar to,
what we know.
living
Yeah,
day.
that way we tank La Brea, right? If we put La Brea's preservation against others, then
But
La Brea's
but
very new.
if you guys
I mean,
remember
if that's the case, isn't there like 1 billion-year-old prokaryote site that we threw, or eukaryote site that we threw in here? That should win. That should win easily because there's
Well,
nothing
Yeah.
that looks like a modern day.
not that the preservation isn't important, just that like it needs to be compared with its like contemporaries. Is it giving us better preservation than we're getting from anything else from the time
Oh
period?
yeah.
Yes.
So in South America, there's like one site of early Oligocene age that's like, it's okay. In Africa, you have the Fayum deposits. So Cori L41 in Africa is pretty good, but every single bone in the L41 Cori is disarticulated. There isn't a single articulated specimen in the entire Fayum sequence, except for maybe one Hyrax. And we don't know how any of these bones go together. Europe, there's the Quercy deposits, which are okay. They're similar enough. They're similar to White River Badlands, but they're not as good. The White River Badlands is much better in terms of quality. And then you go into Asia, yeah, you have the Ergeland Zoe formation, like the Oligocene stuff. You do get, that is where you get Indricotherium, but the quality of the remains is just not as good as White River Badlands. Like you don't have mass pileups of Indricotheres laying around like you do these Entelodonts and rhinos in North America.
That's right.
Unfortunately, I don't think we actually get any Indricotheres migrating into North America, so the White River actually has a number of sites. So yeah, there's White River exposures that are in the national park in the Badlands. That's the best one. But then there's also really good exposures in eastern Wyoming. There's exposures in there's some in North Dakota for some reason, but then there's also some in Nebraska, and some of those are also like Scotts Bluff National Monument. A lot of that's White River Badlands. That has some very nice Badlands outcrops. And they do get other stuff, like they have alligators from the White River Badlands. They have these Bathornid birds, which are they're weird, like Cerium terror bird relatives that are just kind of there. They fall into the curse a lot of these Cenozoic birds do, that there aren't a lot of people who are really willing to study them, especially given that you have like this big predatory bird roaming around North America in the Oligocene.
And what would the apex predators be of the Chadron?
The Entelodons probably. I mean, it's
Kind
so
of the Nick Rat. It's like a lot like in Pleistocene North America, the American lion isn't as big as Arctodus, but
so
like
and that's the thing, is we're really getting into a debate of, you have the Hyenodonts, which are these totally extinct group of carnivorous mammals that are the biggest like pure carnivore that you'd say is like Cole's getting at, is similar to like say a cat. They're not cat-like in terms of ambush, but they're cat-like in terms of being a pure hypercarnivore. Then you get these Entelodonts, which are like these cow-sized, pig-like hippo relatives that probably have a diet more similar to a bear or like a wild hog. Like so in the Badlands, we have like these things are littered with bite marks from Entelodonts all over the place. We get tons of ecological data from the Badlands. You get like there's tons of feeding traces of like Hyenodonts and Nimravids and Entelodonts biting other things. There's The Nimravids, for some reason, appear to be like really ornery, almost like Tasmanian devils, because we have like 3 or 4 specimens of Nimravids who are like impaled by other saber teeth from Nimravids. Um,
I've
so
seen
like
one.
we have a number of like intraspecific combat for these like false saber tooths. I think there's one I think where
Mhm.
it's impaled. There's a couple that are impaled in the skulls. There's one's like really nice and one that's kind of like more eh. But there's a ton of ecological data. The Badlands suffers from the problem in that like it hasn't really been studied. It doesn't get the attention that like say the Chinle does, and so it has all these interesting ecological stories to tell. It's just people kind of overlook the Badlands of the Chinle because the Chinle technically has dinosaurs.
Gotcha.
Even if yeah, they're Coelophysis, yeah, they're Chindosaurus, but it gets more attention because dinosaurs.
And like Badlands as hell pigs. I feel like hell pigs are a bit of a
Yeah, hell
cult.
hogs.
I mean,
Sorry.
if we're gonna go back to one of those older arguments though about big thing, anecdotally with stuff that's being worked on, things like Smilosukis, the Phytosaurs, did have comparable bite forces to things like Tyrannosaurus. I know a few people who are working on that question.
Big 40-foot phytosaur.
They weren't quite that big,
Oh, really?
but
I've
there's
heard 40 feet quoted before. So
yeah. It also has some of the first venomous reptiles that we know of potentially. Um, so that's going to be Microzomoides, Sonsella
so
incis.
and another interesting comparison that's making it even harder to decide between the two is that each one of like both the Shadron and the Shinle are missing like missing one key very famous animal from its perspective point in geologic time. Uh, and in the Shadron, it's Indricotheres, and in the Chinle, it's prosauropods.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, that is true.
Interesting.
So I just know some prospecting with some smaller fossils that might be changing some of that.
Interesting.
There is actually
What?
there is a giant rhino species known from like I'm trying to remember what it was exactly. I don't think it's necessarily an Indricothere, but it's like a rhino that's reaching almost like smaller Indricothere size. I'm trying to remember exactly what it
The
was.
Titanotheres are from the Shatron.
Yeah, no, but this is a rhino
Yeah.
rhino. This is
Oh,
it's
an
one of
actual
it's one
rhino.
of Protheroes. It's
Gotcha.
from the Cabbage Patch Beds,
Uh,
which is like which is like let's see. Oh, here we go. Cabbage Patch Beds. Oh, this is Auricarian, which is a little bit later. It's a Diceratherium rhino, which is it's one of these early horned ones, but it's not from the Shadron specifically.
mhm.
It's from like the upper levels of the White River group. Yeah,
Well,
Diceratherium radticai or something.
I
So
think
it's well,
I think if I'm going to be voting on these, I'm going to have to fall into the Chadron and the White River group in general, just because there aren't really alternatives to it. Whereas, I mean, there are, but they aren't as good. Whereas, like, I know the Dawkins group is not quite as good as the Chinle, but I feel like the Triassic stuff is a little more available than the Oligocene stuff. And
the Chinle is extremely important for our understanding of the Triassic terrestrial fauna. Like it's by far the most studied spot in the world for Triassic terrestrial fauna.
hmm,
I'm
Um,
gonna go Chinley because not
you're
only because I'm in Arizona, I've
because you live
hunted
in
it, but
Arizona.
because I really like early stuff and I really like the assemblage of small and weird things that we can find in the Triassic, including the Chinley. I like the idea of the holdovers that are coming into the Triassic as well as these new things that are starting to form from there. And I think that the Chinley really is one of the best spots in the world for that type of turnover. So
And you
I'm
like
gonna go
I would
Chinley.
agree with that. It's a lot of you're getting a lot of firsts in the Chinle.
if I don't vote White River, then Chinley has too much of a chance to win. And I think I think I know where Russell's going with this, so it's probably going to fall on Harry.
oh boy. No. Well, it's I totally concur with all of the points made for the Chinley with its significance and everything. And Zeke, as you said, a lot of firsts and that. So that's kind of a big deal, when you have that in a formation. But being that I camp in a teepee during the summers in Badlands National Park, and I've done a lot of preparation on the White River group, so I have kind of a tie to that. I prepped a lot of Oreodonts, prepped Entelodont, um, some early camelid stuff, and uh, it is also cool that during World War II, for artillery testing, they would blow up Brontotherian skulls in Badlands National Park because there were these giant
Not
white
cool.
objects.
That's not cool at all.
That's actually one of the reasons. So it's right next to
That's
the
awful.
Lakota Sioux Reservation, and that's one of the reasons that they cite that they don't trust the U.S. government when it comes to preserving the fossils, specifically because the last time you tried, you used them for target practice.
Right. Yeah.
Speaking of pigs, you pig
And
inside.
yeah, I guess. Yeah. No, I think it's
So what are we gonna
terrible.
get? Are we gonna get
But
like a I was gonna say, are you get a Shadron Hell Creek finals and they just
yeah,
both have their controversies?
yeah. I I was also going to say another cool fact is that the White River Formation has aragonite in it, which is chemically very similar to asbestos. So,
Well, a
yeah.
lot of it is made of mixed volcanic ash, right? That's where it probably was
Well,
coming
Yes.
from.
depending on what
Yes.
part of the facies you're in the Chinle, you're also running into that.
Yeah.
Okay,
So wear
okay,
your
I've seen that.
PPE
okay.
when you're
Vote.
prepping. Chandran.
Okay, Shad. Okay, we got three Shadron, and we have two Chinle. Um. Oh
We,
shoot.
when it comes to a tie, we coin flip. We do a digital coin
Okay,
flip.
I'm
We'll, we'll,
basically at a dead tie right now.
we'll do a mummy flip. Okay.
I'm going to vote for Chinle because I'm just gonna like there really are a dead tie. I like the Chinle more, but people have been making a very good case for the Shadron.
Hmm.
So we have, and Russell, you
So I'm
said
gonna say
Chadron.
Chinle just so we can leave this one to fate.
Yeah, I'd rather prospect in the Chinle because I'm just more interested in reptiles than I am mammals. But I have to acknowledge that, you
Well, if
know,
you come to Arizona, let me know.
What does heads mean?
So, oh wait,
Yeah,
so,
how about
so
heads
for
is skin
for
or heads
Chadron,
is what is it?
all right, so for Chadron, we'll do heads and Chinley tails. Does that work for everyone?
Okay.
for the digital coin flip. All right.
Yes. So Chadron
Okay.
heads, Chinley tails.
Okay.
Oh my God. It's heads. Chadron moves on.
Let's go, baby. Okay.
Let's go.
Ooh.
I, right as right
Um,
as right as we were like having this discussion, like when it came down to like who wins, and we're talking about like the Shadron having pigs. Three Halloween just walked outside, so I think that was a portentous omen.
Yeah.
oh, that does it right there.
I'm like, I have fossils from the Chinle in my house. You don't hear me going, oh yeah, well clearly it's the Chinle.
So our
If there
next
was
one
a,
is the
sorry, go ahead.
Cooke Formation, which is the Turkana Basin, versus the Assis de Montecue. I don't know how to say that word. It's in French.
Also, I would think.
This is the one where honestly, I think we put these two options in here just so they can be food for the other formations later. Like,
So I am going to vote again. So that's the French coal seams, right?
Yes. So
So
this
I'm
is
going
a
to vote against the French coal seams just because, like, even in the Carboniferous, that's not the best locality. Ben and I talked about this. We picked it because it's one that's known to produce body fossils of Arthropleura, this giant millipede. But the thing is, this is specifically the one that in like the last 8 months they had. I'll see if I can get the paper. Let's
Oh,
see
where they
here.
micro CT scanned them.
Yeah, it's the one with the
Yeah.
head.
Yeah, no, that one's really cool because Arthropleura normally it's so large. It's this, potentially 10-foot long, 3-meter long millipede or millipede relative. And what you end up getting is like a piece of it, not the whole thing. So it's kind of extrapolation. There were two juvenile ones found in these coal seams that they were able to micro CT scan without necessarily trying to take them out of the whole block. And it's been thought that they were millipedes or close to millipedes, but also maybe closer to centipedes. It's been hard to say for sure. With this, they were able to look at the skulls skulls. They don't have skulls. The heads of them, and see very distinctive millipede traits. So, for example, with the light green way up top on this image, you can see that it has 7 segments on the antenna. That's a millipede trait. 2 sets of legs per segment. That's a millipede trait. So, yeah, it was really useful. However, you still have an extra set of maxilla instead of just 1 set of maxilla processing appendages. You have 2 of them. That's a centipede trait. So you're getting these
And,
really interesting mix of traits.
and it has stalk eyes, which are like neither of those things too, which
Yeah,
is
that's
just
also
weird.
true. Yeah. That's a more basal myriapod, the group that includes centipedes and
Interesting.
millipedes trait.
But
So-
the thing is, at the same time, like this is not a site necessarily that's known for producing a large variety for like the amphibians. The amphibians from the Carboniferous don't come from here, and not even like so. Like this isn't even the site that produces a lot of the Permo-Carboniferous giant griffin flies, that would be Elmo in Kansas. Because the issue that you run into is that localities that preserve insects and other terrestrial arthropods usually don't preserve vertebrates and vice versa. In the Triassic, where you have these big ones, like all these things are scattered among different localities. And this is kind of a big problem in depictions of the Carboniferous and Paleomedia, is that these things are often like they're all shown as living in like the same coal swamp, and they almost certainly didn't. There's a recent paper on the griffin flies that basically said, well, these things don't even occur in the same facies as the coal swamps. They seem to be occurring in like open habitats like horsetail meadows, which if you look at these griffin flies and you realize they can't fold their wings back, is like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It'd be like, imagine today someone did a snapshot of Earth, and in the jungles of the Amazon you had tigers, or in the jungles of the Amazon you had lions and elephants and kangaroos. But that's again because a lot of people don't really they don't really get that, like even back during the Carboniferous, like not everything lives everywhere. It's just that especially when you get back in these older ecosystems, they kind of get glossed over a lot in terms of what's going on.
And the Carboniferous was an ice house world, so we're
like half the world was frozen.
Yeah, so like that's going to inherently be a world with a lot of gradients and diversity of habitats.
Right.
Yeah, there are some nice plants found from here. These are all from this formation.
Cubiphora, that's the site that produces, I want to say it's Homo habilis or Homo erectus. It's one of the two.
So we're talking about
So the Cubiphora, it actually produces Australopithecus as well as Homo habilis as well as Homo erectus.
And Paranthropus.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is where
done deal.
Yeah, this is where Leedy first started collecting hominins in like the early 20th century. Not Leedy, Leaky. Jeez, it's
Okay, so if we have to compare the two, you have the Great Seams Formation and the Cubiphora. Great Seams Formation, cons, it's in France. Cons, bugs. versus Turkana Basin, it's literally like early humans, our own history, and it's in Africa, which is way cooler. So I think this is like feeding a grenade in this context.
I'm not very interested in hominids, so I'm like,
No.
I've gone for the other one. But
no, I'm not either.
So-
I am, but like the type of, it's like you have hominin research is essentially like more people fighting over the same bones than there are actual bones that exist.
Yeah.
That's a good
It's very if you've ever heard of like the ancient Japanese, like in ancient Japanese occultism, you have these things called, like East Asia, the Goode rituals, where it's like you put 100 centipedes and spiders in a pot, seal the pot, and let them fight it out for a year, and then whichever one comes out top is supposedly has eaten the powers of the others or something. That's what hominin paleontology is like. It's a lot of poisonous insects shoved into a very small space.
I know a lot of marriages like that.
It reminds me of like T-Rex research looks.
Oh yeah. So
I concur.
there's a chart out there that there's reason to believe that they're very similar.
All right, so voting.
Cubiphora.
Yep.
I mean, I'll go with France, but yeah.
Boo. All right, what's our next formations going against each other?
All right, so our next formations are going to be the Namek Formation versus the La Brea Tar Pits.
I think one thing that we should let's quickly describe what they are, but then definitely look in the Google Docs because the La Brea tar pits are not what I expected. Like the digging environment that you're actually working in, it's not what I expected. But
It's the south side of LA.
Yeah. So
You didn't know that?
No. I thought like you're working in liquid tar or something like.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, it's definitely
you're
more
just
of a
working it-
solid consistency. Yeah.
You're working in very sticky sand.
Yeah. Let's give a background first. So the La Brea tar pits, it's a late Pleistocene, so like late Ice Age site, literally in metropolitan LA. And it was basically these just tar seeps that animals would fall into and die in huge abundance, and the preservation is amazing. Whereas the Nemegt Formation is in Mongolia. It is not the Cretaceous Mongolian Formation that has Velociraptor, though. The Nemegt Formation has like Deinocheirus and stuff.
It's got something exactly like Velociraptor.
Oh, does it?
Well,
A velociraptorine.
Yeah,
You could kind of call it.
It's Adasaurus, I think, which is like a very fragmentary Velociraptor-esque kind of thing.
Gotcha. In Prehistoric Planet, I think they were trying to depict the Nemegt Formation specifically.
They kind of fudged some things when it came to who lived where. Like, there's about 1 million years difference between some of these sites, which it's reasonable given that like you can't find perfectly matching up sites for everything. Like some of the stuff they showed in Prehistoric Planet was Campanian, I think. Yeah. Like I think
they were pretending like it wasn't. They were like,
right.
If you use a little faith, you can believe that these animals survived longer than they did.
Right. It's understandable, but it's something that needs to be stated up front.
Well, and hypothetically, right, if you're talking about these environments changing through different formations, they're just going to be trying to migrate over time to where what they originally were living in was. So for all we know, underneath the mountains of Mongolia, there is an extension of the Nemegt Formation that is more like the underlying formation where there are velociraptor fossils, or there's an equivalently aged formation.
That is true, but also
squint your eyes
at the
at
same point, I mean, like when we're talking about timescales, you also have to realize that the time frame between some of these is not small. Like the difference between, for example, the early Maastrichtian, which is the dinosaur park, like Carnotaurus is early Maastrichtian, I'm pretty sure. And the difference between Carnotaurus and T-Rex in terms of what we know is about the same difference as, for example, between Australopithecus afarensis and us.
Right.
That's still not very much, but it's
it's Velociraptor is like early Campanian. It's like 10 million years earlier than
right, and that's like there wasn't even hominins then.
But it's also at some point it's just a name. Like you're still talking about a velociraptorine raptor. Like how that's actually different from Adasaurus. Like it's gonna be purely academic, and it's still.
I mean, this would go back to Chiarenza's modeling of dinosaur communities being fairly stable during the end Cretaceous, right? Like. So I'm not too frustrated.
But the real stars of the Nemegt, because there is something like Velociraptor. So you got all the stuff from the Gedocta, which is where Velociraptor is from, but which is a more arid than the Nemegt ends up being. But you also in the Nemegt, the real stars, you have Velociraptor, you have Tarbosaurs, but you also Tarbosaurus, which is a large tyrannosaurid living in Asia. But you also have some true kind of superstars of dinosaur size and weirdness with Deinocheirus and Therizinosaurus.
And in Prehistoric Planet, they had the Mononychus, which I think is charming as well.
Pretty cool, yeah.
I want to say something quickly about the Nemegt. I think the Nemegt is just kind of a more faunally interesting Asian version of the Hell Creek.
Yeah.
The animals are not as like big necessarily, but they're still pretty big. Like Tarbosaurus almost as big as a Rex, but the animals are like just a little weirder. Don't get me wrong, Hell Creek has weird stuff like Anzuiliae, but Therizinosaurus, like come on. What comparison?
Supposedly, there's been some suggestions of supposedly some scrappy Therizinosaurs from the latest Cretaceous in the North America, and then there's been some talk that some of these that there may be some Dinocheirid ornithomimids in the late Cretaceous of North America. They're just not as well preserved as Deinocheirus.
I've heard this Therizinosaur.
Well, I think even like the big Gigantoraptor, the really big Kygnatid Oviraptor, and there's some reportedly very large stuff of that also from I believe the Hell Creek. So
Gigantoraptor is like like Turonian.
yeah, but
So
there's
the bottom shape.
reportedly some very
Oh,
large, like comparable sized
purposes.
Kygnatid material.
Yeah, I found a proximal end of a femur that was like twice, if not over twice the size of the Anzu holotype. I know there's been some bigger connected stuff found in Canada, but yeah, there's been some pretty interesting connected size stuff. So,
Let's
And
bring.
I
but
would say something in favor of La Brea too is that the preservational
yeah,
environment is just so weird compared to everything else. Like, I
Mm,
think there's
yeah,
only like maybe less than 5 tar seep localities period in the fossil record. One of which
hmm
is like the other. They're almost all like late Pleistocene stuff along this arc from Southern California through like Venezuela and stuff. And La Brea is by far the best. The next best is like the McKittrick seeps also in California.
Well, no, there's
yes,
also really good seeps in I want to say Ecuador, but yeah,
Yeah, it's
maybe
Ecuador.
Peru.
There's
yeah,
Venezuela. But
Zeke.
there's not
and then
many of them.
yeah,
There's like compared the Nemeth formation is your typical, you know, it's your typical just like if you show pictures of the Nemeth formation, it's gonna look this almost the same as the Balfour. It's gonna look almost the same as Dowser Park, almost the same as the Hell Creek. It's Badlands. We've seen
But with
Badlands.
sauropods.
Yes, and the Morrisons coming up, which have better sauropods, which but also are badlands. Whereas the Brea Tar Pits is this really weird environment, both in terms of modern day preservation and in terms of like the preservation in terms of how it was preserved.
Well, and also just like the fact that LA grew around it, and so now it's just like in the middle of LA.
Oh yeah,
And
there's only
like
there.
you
yeah.
don't have to like
That's an
drive.
amazing.
You,
Yeah,
you can take public transport there. You
Yeah,
don't
it's in
need
the yeah.
to take to drive
Uh,
yourself out into the desert.
Zeke, bring up the Google Doc. Look at the photos I included of the La Brea, also the Nemect, but the La Brea is crazy. I was visiting a website that was basically just like, hey, we're digging out the foundation of a new building. Look at these skulls just falling out of the dirt for this foundation. That's an American lion skull at the bottom and a saber-tooth skull at the top. I don't know if it's Smilodon specifically or anything.
it's Smilodon. I don't think Homotherium is actually known from La Brea. It's known from like Texas and stuff, but it's
yeah.
mostly Smilodon La
It
Brea.
was more of a plains type animal, is what my understanding is,
So
Homotherium.
was so was the lion
Whereas
for that.
this was somewhat forested. My other thing to add with sorry, which the other one we're looking for is the Nemegt, right?
Yeah.
My other thing with the Little Brea is because it's a tar seep, you get a very unique fauna. So it's great to go, oh, look at Smilodon and all these really big animals. Those aren't necessarily the important ones for understanding an environment. It's a small one. And so because you're getting regularly, you're also getting a lot of these smaller animals. You're getting skunks, you're getting rattlesnakes, you're getting other snakes and reptiles before you're catching, one dire wolf or whatever. Um, oh,
Yeah.
they were right next to each other. Um, but because of that, you get a very good look at what the ecosystem was like and kind of what it would have changed over time. Because I know there was a talk at one of the SVPs, Society for Paleontology meetings, where they looked at that. And I don't remember all of their data, but it's like, yeah, you can correlate different mammals occurring, small mammals occurring in the La Brea tar pits with different changes in the environment, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, and honestly, to turn that around on its head, this is something a lot of people don't realize because La Brea tar pits has spoiled us so much as paleontologists. If the La Brea tar pits were to magically get erased from the fossil record, it's a predator trap. So like 75% of all the fossils at this site are dire wolves and American lions and smilodons. If La Brea was to get erased from the fossil record, our knowledge of the anatomy and paleobiology of these late Pleistocene predators would go to nothing
Oh, really?
because like people don't realize this. The fossils of these large predators
Mm.
from elsewhere in the U.S. are often not that great. Finding even one decent skull of these things is very rare. Like, so I live in Ohio, and I often get people saying, "Well, don't we have any big Ice Age carnivores in Ohio?" It's like, yeah, we have two. We have an Arcturus find from northwestern Ohio, and then from the same site, we have one direwolf specimen. It is an enamel fragment of a lower incisor that was so bad, no one even knew it was a direwolf until they did DNA testing on it, and it turned out it came back as canid versus ursid. Like, we do not have any direwolves. You have to go, like, over to Indiana to actually get any direwolf remains. And even then, you get maybe like one good Pleistocene carnivore state almost. Unless you're like going down to like say Florida or Texas, which do have a bit more. But like La Brea, especially because La Brea is so fossiliferous, they like almost every museum in the U.S. and Canada has one of these. Like even the Cleveland Museum has a Smilodon skull from La Brea just randomly sitting in their basement. We've become so spoiled by the number of carnivore specimens at La Brea and how well it makes these late Pleistocene megacarnivores known that it kind of spoils the fact that like their record is not very good outside of Southern California. It's okay, but I mean, it's much worse than most of the other Pleistocene megafauna.
Well,
Just
that's
because
kind of it
carnivores are
being
rare.
unique. Well, that's kind of how it's unique too. It's a predator trap, right? Because normally you're going to find a lot more herbivores than carnivores. And there's collection biases, sure. People would rather collect a Tyrannosaurus Rex than an Edmontosaurus if they can only get one, right?
Hang on, we should probably show the wall of dire wolves if someone can find that, because
I'll
that's
stop
perfect.
sharing if someone wants to find it. But yeah, no, like that's exactly, same kind of thing where there's the collection biases. But even with those collection biases, we just tend to find more herbivores because there's more of them in the environment, right?
Oh, here we go.
So when you end up having a site like this that is a predator trap, it's such a great tool for understanding the dynamics behind these animals.
So this is a wall of like 400 distinct direwolf skulls from La Brea, and that's probably not even all of them. That's probably just as many as they could fit in one of those cabinets.
Yeah.
Because my guess is I'm not sure how easy it is to even get in those cabinets, but I think that's an older display, and those displays are usually made to not be able to easily get into. So it's very likely that there's more of them in the collections. They just, didn't want to have
far more.
everything.
Yeah, far more. Yeah, thousands.
Yep.
Yeah.
Of
I believe
complete
20,000.
skeletons. Yeah.
Of what?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, they have cumulatively, if you were to pile up all the direwolf bones, you have probably a couple thousand complete skeletons
Yeah.
too, or at least 80 plus complete skeletons.
That's a
If that
big.
makes sense. 80% plus complete. So yeah, it's. I grew up there. I grew up in Orange County, so the La Brea was my fostering, for paleontology from a personal angle. But yes, there is no other Pleistocene assemblage like it. There's Mammoth Hot Spring sites with just
Julie
Columbian
Springs,
mammoths, but
Julie Springs over in Vegas would probably be really famous if La Brea wasn't right next door.
I think La Brea
yeah,
Solos.
look at this one. Yeah,
Yep. Let's go La Brea.
All
La
right.
Brea, yeah.
La Brea.
I do like
I like all the animals than Nemegt more.
if
Therizinosaurus and Dinocyrus are just such incredible.
yeah, it's so tough. Yeah,
as
If it was the
genetic
Jokta, I would be a little bit more hesitant,
Exactly.
but La Brea.
if it was the Jokta, I'd be like, all right, you got all the lizards. I'm going with the Jokta.
And there's also the historical importance of the Jokta, because that's where the first dinosaur eggshells were found.
Yeah.
and I do want to say that La Brea on this list is the only formation or site that has a Homo sapien preserved in it.
True, the La Brea woman.
Yes, she's about like 2,000 years old or something. But
Yeah,
someone threw her in there.
She's Holocene. I think it's old. I think it's like 6,000 or something like that.
Oh, is it? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, she failed in life and fell into the tar pit.
Didn't she get? Wasn't there some debate if she got murdered or not?
Probably, honestly.
Yeah, that's some of what they were saying. According to a quick Google, about 10,200 years old,
Oh,
give or
what?
take.
So I guess it is Pleistocene.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say La
suppose.
Brea as well. So I think La Brea sweeps.
Yeah.
Awesome. So as you can see, we're all wearing different clothes right now. That's because we had to do 2 sections for recording this episode. But anyways, getting right back to it. And I know if you're staying this far, you should probably like, comment, subscribe, all of that stuff, and let us know what you think of our picks so far, because you're definitely a paleo nerd like we are. But anyways, carrying forward,
I'd like to say I don't know what Ben is talking about. We just got done recording the last one, and he asked us all to jump up and change our clothes, and then come back.
Our next battle is the Morrison Formation versus the Green River Formation.
Okay, so the Morrison Formation is everything that Harry was saying about Hell Creek, but more so. Morrison Formation was
Yeah.
The Morrison Formation was like really the birthplace of American paleontology. No, I mean I guess that's kind of New Jersey, but the Morrison Formation was the place that Western explorers identified as being really rich in dinosaur bones, and was the focal point for scientific attention on paleontology in North America, as because these beds are obviously much richer and better exposed and containing a lot more fossils than any kind of European equivalent of dinosaur bearing strata. So the Morrison Formation is one of, if not the best explored and rich dinosaur assemblages on the planet. It preserves about 5 to 8 million years of deposition. It's kind of hard to correlate the strata from Wyoming to Colorado to Utah to New Mexico, but it to South Dakota, but it preserves a lot, and you have faunal changes going on over time within the Morrison. That's clear. The Morrison is a rare case where we're almost working with too much data in order to actually discern what's happening, because the amount of data is so of all these incredible skeletons are spread out through so many institutions and preservation styles that it's often pretty hard to kind of make them all standardized with each other. So the Morrison is obviously where a lot of the most famous dinosaurs come from: Brontosaurus, Stegosaurus, Allosaurus, Ceratosaurus, Diplodocus, and beloved Brachiosaurus all come from the Morrison Formation. It's the land of long necks. I saw a really interesting paper comparing average sizes of known dinosaur taxon from every geologic time period, so early Jurassic, mid Jurassic, late Jurassic, early Cretaceous, late Cretaceous, and the graph kind of starts low with the early Jurassic, of average body mass in these dinosaurs. Starts low in the Triassic and early Jurassic, and then kind of builds up. But there's this enormous spike within the late Jurassic of an average of dinosaur body masses being on average enormous. Like I believe the number was like 22,000 kilograms was the average dinosaur known from the late Jurassic, and that's because of the Morrison Formation, because of how many sauropods, land whales, long necks are found within the Morrison Formation. We're up to, I believe, almost 3 dozen different taxa of sauropod. So an incredibly diverse system. How many of those are real? How many of those are chronospeed? How many of those might be anagenetic? Remains to be seen. But given how much time is occurring within the Morrison, I find it plausible that there actually is this incredible diversity of sauropods within it. We have several giant theropods. We have the Allosaurus, we have the Torvosaurus, giant megalosaur. We have the giant, and we have Ceratosaurus isn't the giant by dinosaur standards, but it's the size of a polar bear at its smallest. So it would the least of these, draconic predators would still be the scariest thing. If it was alive today, would be the scariest thing any human being has ever encountered.
Well, and the issue with the Ceratosaurus too is there's one really good specimen, which is a relatively young one.
Right.
We have bits and pieces of other ones which are getting close to rivaling the sizes of the Allosaurus and whatnot. So it's another one of these huge theropods. You're also missing out on mentioning things like Marshiosaurus and some of these other, smaller theropods that are
Single specimen taxon.
yeah, yeah, but they're still there and they're relatively small, right? So when I say relatively small, I mean under 20 feet long. So under, what is that, about 6 meters or so? So they're still big animals, and they're still all surviving in this same
they're still
environment.
tiger size. They're still the size of a tiger, the biggest.
I believe the Morrison Formation is in something like 13 states. It's in Oklahoma, it's in Arizona, New Mexico, and then all the way up into potentially into Canada. There's some debates about that still, but it's a big area.
And also the fossils are radioactive, some of them.
Sometimes. Oh, yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
There's actually been some cool developments on using drone technology to find Morrison fossils based off of the radioactive signatures.
Finally,
that's forthcoming though. That's forthcoming. So,
well, in Jurassic Park, they were digging up a raptor and they shot a sonar on the ground to show the skeleton, And I've certainly never used technology like that when I'm digging up dinosaurs. So it's
I'm
good to see.
90%.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm 90% sure it has to be based on. It's an extrapolation of Animantarchs and that hadrosaur that were collected by using radioactive detecting in Utah. But
Okay.
like that kind of technology just kind of stagnated, and then nothing ever happened with it until I guess recently.
We used when we were digging up Gracie. Somebody invited a guy to the site to try and use GPR just so we can get data points. And so, like, when you're for those of you who are listening, if you've not done a dig, think about Jurassic Park, right, where they're digging up this velociraptor and the whole thing's exposed on the surface. You never do it like that in paleontology. The general rule of thumb is don't expose anything in the field because you'd rather expose things in the lab. It's a more controlled environment. And so we were digging up Gracie and we had this giant block of most of her body in it. And the guy came in with the GPR to try and get data points of like, okay, we think there's bone here. Because GPR is used to detect like pipes, for example. Like if there's a pipe in the ground, GPR can detect
And
that.
GPR stands for.
Ground penetrating radar.
There you go.
So sorry, I should have mentioned that. But anyway, with all that being said, maybe we just didn't have the best system for it, but it's hard to apply it to the field. As it stands right now, the mobile technology that is able to be handheld was not super good. Like some of the data points weren't that great, but it also depends on the formation and all of that. But all that tangent aside, I would like to hop onto Cole's points of how frequent fossils are there. I've had dudes DM me on Instagram asking for IDs of stuff. And there was this guy who was finding these teeth. I ID'd the teeth for him. He was finding them in, I think, the Tropic Shale in Utah. And then he was like, yeah, I also found some dinosaur stuff out in the Morrison, not too far away. And you have like articulated vertebral columns and sandstone and stuff that he was showing me. And he goes, to be honest, these are so common that I'm actually more interested in the shark teeth because they're rarer. Like the shark teeth and chocolate. Like he's finding articulated dinosaurs in sandstone, and he's just kind of like, whatever. That's how common fossils are in the Morrison.
Yeah, so Morrison, it's a big floodplain. It's an aerated, like it's usually interpreted as a savanna type system, trending wetter as you go further north towards the retreating Sundance Sea, and then drier as you head towards Utah, which is kind of Morrison heartland. And I suspect that that throughout these 8 million years of fossil preservation within the Morrison, there's actually some more variable types of environment than we originally knew about. I had a really interesting conversation with Dr. John Foster, who wrote the Morrison Bible, regarding kind of provinciality in some of these smaller dinosaur species like Ornitholestes, Tanicolagrius, etc. We know that there's a duny area. We know that there's a big salt flat down kind of in southern Utah that's preserved as part of the Morrison system, kind of setting the stage for that Diplodocus hunt on the salt flats during the Big Al documentary, which I'm sure many of us have seen. And we even have a little itty bitty Lagerstadt in western Colorado. There's a spot called the Fruta Paleontological Area, and you have a unique kind of like anoxic lake environment that's preserving mammal fossils. There's a really cool mammal there called Frutafosser that's interpreted as a burrower. You have a late surviving heterodinosaur called Frutidens.
Wow.
Big kind of tusky little ornithopod. Well, it looks like an ornithopod. It's not. It's a lot more basal, but it looks like kind of a Dryosaurus with like tusks and stuff. Maybe an omnivore, burrowing omnivore. So it's not just the big guys that have diversity there. Anyways, I'll relinquish the floor.
Ben, are there any sharks known from the Morrison or chondrichthys?
I don't believe there's any chondrichthyans described from the Morrison.
Um,
I would imagine a hybodont lurking around somewhere in there.
I'm almost certain there's a hybrid there.
See,
Yeah.
we've met sharks now. Mission accomplished. Check her.
The museum in Fruta is really cool. So if anybody wants to go to Fruta, Colorado, the dinosaur museum there, where I believe you can see some of the aforementioned Lagerstadt specimens are in the Fruta Museum. You know, they have a really cool viewing window for their prep lab, and there you could see the rows of their collections and everything. So Pretty neat museum. If you guys are ever in Fruita, Colorado, highly recommend it.
There is
What?
really interesting stuff happening with the Morrison Formation, but that remains to be published. But the New Mexico Museum of Natural History and Science is doing an entire volume, kind of like this one, but this one is Arizona based. This is this kind of thing, but for the Morrison Formation specifically. So
Awesome.
hypothetically, in another year or so, we're gonna get a huge info dump about the Morrison Formation, and
Awesome.
there's gonna be some interesting stuff there.
Yeah.
So going to the Green River Formation, that's kind of like the quintessential Lagerstadt.
We should explain the Green River a little bit. The Green River is an Eocene lake that has preserved, essentially. And it was like a freaking giant lake, too. I don't know.
Really?
It's a series
Oh,
of one
I
of
actually got
three
that
very
here.
large lakes.
So yeah,
Yeah,
it's this
so
series of lakes.
Gotcha.
there's a series of, and these lakes are, I mean, they're not, I guess, I wouldn't say they're as large as the Great Lakes, but they're so large that some climatic models have actually suggested they actually had a significant influence on the climate of North America during the Eocene, that they basically warped the climate so much they were so big. And ironically, if you look way on the left, it says Ancient Fossil Lake. That's near what's now Kimmer, Wyoming, and that would be where that is the most famous exposure to the Green River Formation. That's at Fossil Butte, but there's all sorts of exposures going down through Utah, northwestern Colorado, and a lot of southwestern Wyoming.
And correct
And
me if I'm wrong, but when you talk about Fossil Lake, Fossil Butte, that is a national monument, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a national monument, but there are quarries outside it that allow quarrying. The Green River fishes are odd because the 7 most common species, Nidea, Myopolosis, Diplomystis, it used to be Priscacara, but now it's Cochrolytes. Ferriotis and Notagonius are kind of in a gray area when it comes to collecting vertebrate fossils on like public lands. There's like a weird gray area with them, but like the rarer stuff is kind of still protected. But within the boundaries of the park, everything is protected. Like Nidea is so common that you could throw a rock and hit one.
yeah, and it's insane. It's insane Lagerstadt. I would like to mention that correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the Green River where the oldest bat fossils are known from?
Yeah.
It's at least one of the areas where they are. I think there might be one more that's older from like
It's
India, but it's like a tooth.
they're
As
all the
opposed
Is
same.
Green River older than the
a
Messel?
very
It's the same age.
It's
So the Green
it's
River, the
approximately the
Messel,
same.
and the Indian bat producing locality are pretty much all the same age, which is really weird because all these like bat fossil sites are showing up at the same time, which suggests that they've already
When you're getting
dispersed everywhere.
birds like that too, that's the thing.
Oh yeah.
You have this, and so it's like birds just, exploded after this the extinction that killed off the non-bird dinosaurs, and they showed up everywhere. Like you even have a Messel ornithid named after Messalornis from the Messel pit in
There
the Green River Formation. Like these
There's-
things are just showing up everywhere.
there's what's probably a gastornid feather from the Green River that's like almost a foot long. That's probably
pretty
from one of the wing feathers.
And birds show up with feathers, I guess rarely, but
Well, they don't have. So this is an isolated feather. A lot of these things you can see they don't have a lot of soft tissues. They're not as good as Messel, but the skeletons are very good.
I've seen quite a few specimens of birds. Well, not in person, but quite a few specimens of birds with feathers from the Green River. Like I know a guy in Dallas who preps birds and or not preps birds. He preps a lot of Green River stuff, and he's done at least one bird. And this is just like a commercial guy. Like he's a commercial prepper, or preparator rather. And so if bird fossils like that are making it out of just like like Archaeopteryx, for example, right? Something that
Right.
rare,
Yeah.
usually finding its way in like the Smithsonian, or sorry, not the Smithsonian, the field, like the most high-end museums, because of that preservation. But then you get stuff like this, and like why not send it to this to this dude in Dallas and prep it, and we'll keep it, hang on to it. Like it's not super rare to find those birds with feathers on them. And then early horses, like you're pointing to. My favorite.
And what's funny too is that of all these birds from the Green River, none of them are songbirds. Songbirds, it's not they hadn't evolved yet. It's that they were still not very diversified. So songbirds are originally from Australia, and during the Eocene, they were still pretty much stuck in Australia.
Interesting.
Instead, you have a whole bunch of other birds taking the songbird niches.
And there are beautiful crocodiles and stuff that come from the
Oh
creek.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some really
Also,
nice. You get Borealisuchus, which actually survived the impact, as a
mhm.
genus it did. Um, and so you got to think again, like I was talking about with Germany, with the Messel Pit, subtropical. You're in subtropical Wyoming, which is not how you would describe Wyoming today. Um, Lots of insects as well. There, did I just miss reptiles? There we go. I just went
One of
too
my
far. Got
favorite
it.
one of my favorite fossils, like period in general. I think everybody has a favorite specimen. One of my favorites is a horse from the Green River Formation, nicknamed Olive, which is kind of funny because the mosasaur, my brother and I, is also called Olive. But it's this horse with all these fish next to it and stuff, and tiny little horses too. That's a beautiful croc. I
Yeah,
mean, this
I
is
love me
really
some Crocs,
really impressive. It is just basically the American version of the Messel Pit.
but over a
Yeah,
much larger area. It isn't
yeah,
just a trash
Mm,
pit, essentially.
true.
yeah.
Show Heliobatus. Those are the freshwater
Um,
stingrays.
Control
oh,
F.
okay, it was all the way up at the top. Yeah, I was getting there. I know my control Fs.
Like that is beautiful.
Oh yeah, no, there it's incredible that you have like these stingrays that are freshwater stingrays, presumably, right? Like the
Yeah.
lake isn't gonna have them just migrating in periodically. But
Yeah.
And I don't want to say
you
they're
can see the
common. I don't want to say they're common, but I've seen a lot of freshwater stingrays from the Green River. Like
yeah, there's a lot.
I know.
I've when I go to the gem show, and you can even see the barb on it on this one. I just wanted to highlight that.
Honestly,
So there
here
you go.
let's get a vibe check on this. Do we like the Green River Formation more than Messel?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Eh,
No.
Because
I
that
don't
was
know, because actually the Messel does have a lot of other stuff. I don't
Yeah.
know.
But
Bargain bin fossils.
yeah, I think if we were going to talk about compare the preservation between the two, obviously the Messel has some freakish preservation. You know, the
Yeah.
Green River is exquisite with its uh, skeletal remains, but
Well,
Messel's a
but
freak.
the
The
Green River is
issue
more abundant, I would think, though,
the
as far as
Yes,
fossils.
exactly.
yes,
The Green
yeah,
River has far more fossils because again, it isn't just a
right.
single pit. However, the Messel, when you have an important specimen from the Messel, it's very important. Whereas
oh,
the only
Mhm.
highly key specimen from Green River are really those bats. Like we know
mm,
that stingrays can go into fresh water. We know that there were, snakes and lizards around.
gotcha.
When you're getting to the Messel pit, you are finding things that are so unique and can capture behaviors like those mating turtles in such unique ways that I think it does win out now that I'm thinking about it more.
That
And
that,
Well,
again,
that
you know, I think one other thing to note, this is kind of a, I know we always talk about the modern aspects of the formation. The Green River has a good partnership with the Field Museum. So for years, the field has been purchasing and had a good symbiotic relationship with all the private quarries around the Fossil Butte National Monument. And even the people at Fossil Butte will say, yeah, I mean, the stuff that the quarries have produced far more specimens and published specimens, I believe. You'll have to check me on that, but than the actual, public land, because those pits or those quarries, which are kind of like they act as like a tourist and it's a private quarry, but they are primarily kind of like a tourist based
mm,
economy.
yeah.
That's sort of how they operate because a lot of the fish are, of course, people could take them home. They could, and I think some of the pits, like you could take anything home that is less than 100,000 in value.
Hmm.
wow.
So, which is pretty generous, as far
Well,
as
my $99,000 fish that I'm gonna bring home this
yeah.
on.
I think
Yeah, so yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. But yeah, they produced more research out of those things than, I mean, not the people who found it, but the specimens have been published on more so than the National Monument.
The
I
Green
was
River Formation, as we were saying, is a lake environment. Lakes have really boring rocks that are basically just white lines. I grew up near rocks like this. I can tell you that, yeah, it's basically this is what you get. You get flat white stratigraphy.
Yeah.
Occasionally it'll be a slight yellow maybe, but it's not nearly as exciting in my opinion. I was gonna say it's also miserable to work in the summer because all of the rock is shining the light right back at you, so it just bakes.
I would say here, Morrison has more iconic fauna.
Yep.
Its lithology is more beautiful.
hmm
The preservation is not as good. That's where it loses points. It's definitely not a
But the
Lagerstadt,
thing
but
is, you have a few lenses of it that are Lagerstadt, and I think importantly, you need to consider you're draining basically all of Western North America through the Morrison Formation. Meaning,
yeah,
when you think about that, you're going from at the very southern part of the United States, basically up to the northern part, and you can think about the environments that are present in the present day with that kind of thing. The difference between, Louisiana, Kansas, and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, they're very different environments. And that's kind of what you're getting based on the different faunas that we see in the Morrison Formation. You get this kind of latitudinal gradient across it, at least according to some authors. And there's, again, more work being done on that.
plus I don't think the entire Green River Formation is a Lagerstadt. I'm pretty sure it's mostly just the sandwich beds. That's the
Yeah,
most.
just a few of them.
So I'm honestly going with Morrison on this one.
Yeah.
If the Green River can't beat Meso, it can't beat Morrison.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yep.
Oh,
I would
baby.
agree on Morrison.
All right.
Thorough
Ben, do you
Fig
want
and
to get
Axe
it up there
agrees.
and snacks?
You mean Allosaurus annex?
I know. I hear there's a counter publication come from Brian Curtis.
Yeah, I know Andy and Brian, and so I've heard a little bit from both sides of that. So
That's
we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. I think Andy's bang on. I will go on
I
record.
think he did do a very solid job.
If anyone's interested, we do have a Gentleman of the Corax episode with Andy, with a lot of us actually, on Saurophagonax and the Kings of the Jurassic. So go check that one out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so our last ones before we start getting down to it is the Nocona Formation versus the Yixian Formation. So
Yishin.
start off, yeah, the Nocona Formation. This was just a formation that we picked, but we can really talk about the Permian red beds in Texas in its entirety for this because one thing that we came across here was the stratigraphy is just awful with
Here.
these Texas Permian localities. Like the Nocona was considered to be the Admiral Formation. The Admiral Formation is apparently marine, but these are equivalent in age. There's other ones like the Arroyo Formation, which apparently have some marine lenses in them. And
So when we were looking at this, one of the things that we ran into was that like there's multiple bone beds in this group, and the best bone beds are from the Nocona, but then the famous Dimetrodon skeleton everyone always thinks of that's in Romer's papers is from an early species of Dimetrodon, which is from the lower levels in the Archer City. Just to get at what Ben's saying, agreeing with what he's saying.
Let's reel this back a little bit. Texas red beds as a whole, like we're just using the Nocona as a representative of the red beds. It's Permian red rocks or red stratigraphy in North Texas. So this is like, think of the Whiteside Museum. If you follow the Whiteside Museum and stuff like that on Instagram, the Whiteside Museum, when they're digging up the Permian stuff, they're in the Texas red beds. And so that's kind of where we've put ourselves. And honestly, the red beds, like if you're thinking about things like Dimetrodon and Edaphosaurus, they're known best from North Texas. I'm not even sure if Dimetrodon has been found other places.
It
I'm
has,
sure.
yeah.
Oh, it
There's
has.
a few.
It's in
Dimetrodon's
Ohio.
like 50 species.
It's in Ohio.
Dimetrodon is like over a dozen species, like well over a dozen.
Yeah.
And on it, Europe as well.
Gotcha.
Technically, the first Dimetrodon wasn't even found in Texas. It was found in Canada, but it was only a jaw fragment. And so people looked at it later and went, "Oh, hey, this is actually Dimetrodon," and everyone already knows Dimetrodon, so just call
Well,
it
and
Dimetrodon
this
now.
is a Pangean like environment. So like you're seeing not like pretty low amounts of endemism and a lot of global taxa.
Real quick,
Yes.
the Permian is going to be this is going to be about 300 million years ago or so. As we were saying,
Early
Pangea, yeah, early Permian. And so Pangea had really just come together. You're starting to get vertebrates that are moving onto land and starting to diversify away from the water, which is one of the really big things that's happening is you start getting amniotes that can lay eggs away from water. It's not just amphibians anymore.
Okay, so red beds. I feel like I've forsaken them a little bit because, I'm a Texan, but I've never even bothered to read about the red beds. I've just been so focused on Cretaceous stuff. And I went down some pretty delightful rabbit holes. When we think about paleontology in the American West, yeah, we're thinking about Cope and Marsh and the Morrison, which we didn't even mention when we were bringing up the Morrison. That's where most of
I
that.
think I mentioned that the Bone Wars were fought over the Morrison, but
The thing is, though, is that they also did some stuff in the red beds in Texas, and Cope, Edward Drinker Cope, had some people prospecting for him. And so, if you imagine West Texas in your head, okay, the stereotypical trope of West Texas, whatever you're envisioning in your head, that's what it's like in the red beds. It is Wild West cowboy stuff. This is just west. This is like west of Fort Worth, and these early naturalists that were prospecting it came into some scraps. There was this Swiss guy who was prospecting for Edward Drinker Cope in the red beds, collecting specimens for him. His name was Jacob Boll, and he actually was responsible for the discovery of like 30 different species. And his final moments in Texas were pretty interesting. He was out collecting in the red beds, and he was bitten by a rattlesnake. And so what he did with his last moments, I will summarize it here from this website that I'm reading about him. Unfortunately, on his last trip, he was bitten by a rattlesnake. He wrote some letters to his family, composed a short poem in German, and died. Like, that's just so quick and brutal.
That's so cowboy, dude.
That's so cowboy. It's the coolest thing I've ever heard. Like, this dude is just in Texas finding fossils, gets bitten by a rattlesnake, writes to his family, sits down and dies. Like, that's crazy. Then, so there was actually some pretty cool history with the red beds. I've been sleeping on the red beds a little. I thought this was going to be an absolute massacre to the red beds, and it might be when we get to the issue and you'll hear about it. But the red beds are pretty cool, and they've done a lot for vertebrate paleontology.
Building off of Ezekiel's point from earlier, which I will let him take over in just a second, but these red beds are preserving like the earliest like structured terrestrial ecologies of vertebrates. So right before this is the Carboniferous, and you had the earliest amniotes, animals that could actually live their whole lives on land, evolving there, but they didn't actually get big and start radiating into all these different kind of niches until the ecosystems preserved in the Permian red beds, when we're getting like the very earliest terrestrial amniote communities where every ecological niche is being large body ecological niche is being filled by a reptile or tetrapod of some sort.
Plus, the fauna is just cool. Like, the Metrodon is cool. You get
classic.
Were there therapsids in
No.
the beds?
There's a significant gap between the red beds and the earliest therapsid specimens. The record from basically the middle Permian record's not very good. The North American record stops right at the top of the red beds, and it doesn't pick up again for terrestrial animals until like the Triassic. It doesn't pick up again until the Triassic.
Yeah, like you do have some other Permian terrestrial environments like the Coconino Sandstone. The Coconino Sandstone basically only preserves footprints. So like, yeah, there's just this massive gap in what's happening on land, at least in North America.
And yeah, I think you got some stuff in in the Karoo Basin, same as the Balfour Formation from the lowest levels, but it's not as good as the red beds. One animal that I think is really neat from the red beds, not from the Nocona, but it is from the Arroyo, which we batted around using as our early Permian formation, red bed formation first, is that it's got the earliest large body tetrapod herbivore called Diadectes. Which is from these red beds, I was visiting SMU on a college visit recently, and I walked into one of their labs, and there was a dude just doing tests on Diadectes teeth, which I thought was pretty cool, trying to establish kind of ecological niche partitioning and variations in time and space, which was cool research, I thought.
And if you are chondrichthyan biased like me, we talked a little bit about the Chinle Formation, this freshwater shark relative called Moriodontis. Well, the more well-known shark relative that's closely related, Orthocanthus, is really abundant within these Texas red beds. These got pretty decently long. They had this tooth design, this diplodon tooth design. So you have these two crown cusps that are next to each other like that, with a tiny medial cusplet. Sometimes you might not even have that. Whereas when you traditionally think of a shark tooth, you think of this one large median cusp, and then maybe you'll have these smaller lateral cusplets. So it's a really unique tooth design from these xenocanths. And you can see too that there's serrations. Orthocanthus can have these serrations, which is pretty cool. They're kind of eel-like in shape, and these would have been apex predators within these freshwater Permian environments.
Cool.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a nice figure. The thing that I want to say that could be a nice transition is talking about the Ixion. While the red beds is famous and it produces a lot of fossils and all this and all that, one thing is that it is certainly no Lagerstadt. And oh yeah, see, there are some pictures. It's pretty hard to find pictures of the Nocona specifically, but
That's pretty.
yeah, most of it looks like the less pretty pictures, just from what I know about it. But point is that the red beds are certainly no Lagerstadt. You know what is a Lagerstadt is the Ixion. And I don't know much about the Ixion, and I know some of y'all do. All I can say from my point of knowledge right now is the Ixion is kind of like the Muhammad Ali of these formations that I'm aware of. I think it's pretty nuts. And I know it's known for like early feathers on dinosaurs and stuff. When you look up feathered dinosaurs, you're probably seeing fossils from the Ixion. And if you don't quite the Ixion, then to what you might recognize it as is it's part of the Jehol biota. So you've probably heard a lot of hype about the Jehol biota. And the Ixion is, I don't remember if it's the upper or the lower formation of the Jehol biota, but both of the formations
upper. It's definitely upper.
Yeah, it's Cretaceous. The other one is, I believe, late Jurassic.
Yep.
Oh, okay, cool.
I will also say it's the Yishin, as it's pronounced, not the Yixian.
There you go.
I did that for a long time too. But yeah, you have like Confuciusornis, which is this early bird. And this one actually we can probably say is female because there are some specimens that are basically anatomically identical, except they have very long tail feathers. Those likely to display structure very similar to what we do see in modern day birds. So you're seeing this kind of biota that's like perfectly capturing birds as they became birds. And again, you have your short tail with the little pygostyle down here so that you can have that short tail, whereas things like Archaeopteryx that were older still had these very long tails. You also get a number of other animals, of course. This one's very interesting because you have a small mammal apparently trying to predate upon a much larger dinosaur. There was a recent paper that suggested these kinds of things. The authors suggested, oh yeah, like they clearly just got covered in pyroclastic flow. What is now seeming more likely is they were in a den and the den collapsed. There's a few fossils from the Yishin formation that are very well preserved like this in 3 dimensions. So that's wonderful. These ones don't have feathers though. The ones at the bottom of the lake beds that have the soft tissue preservation, obviously not
Within
feathers.
the bottom of the lakes, because you have these still waters, the water becomes very stratified. For our listeners who might not be familiar with what makes these formations so important, these big lakes like the Yishian, at the bottom of these lakes is very, these lakes come because they become very stratified. Bottom layers don't have any oxygen because there's no mixing going on. So when animals die and fall into this bottom layer of the lake, they're not able to be scavenged by either actual scavengers or decomposed by bacteria, and because there's no oxygen for these organisms, scavenging organisms, to survive, and they just sit there and are buried, and that's what allows their preservation to be so good, is anoxic conditions at the bottom of these lakes. So anyways,
if you remember dear listener, if you remember those headlines about, oh, guess what? We know what dinosaur buttholes look like now. That was also because of a Psittacosaurus that was found in the Ischian.
Keep it on this picture for a second. Yeah, keep going, Jared.
Uh, in fact, Psittacosaurus is probably the dinosaur that we as humans are most positive we know basically exactly how it looked. Melanosomes are preserved in some of these Psittacosaurs, which, by the way, Psittacosaurus, it's an early ceratopsian, so it's pretty small. It's not like a triceratops size thing. It doesn't have a big furrow on its neck just yet. But we have a sense of their color just because of melanosomes are preserved throughout their body, and these soft tissue structures like a cloaca are preserved, and it's pretty crazy. It's really interesting, actually.
So to be clear, and above just the early bird preservation, which is extremely important, the Ischian is where we got our very first evidence of feathered dinosaurs. This was the ultimate culmination, these discoveries, the ultimate culmination of the dinosaur renaissance was transitioned in the dinosaur renaissance occurred throughout kind of the 60s and into all the way into the 90s was this process of transitioning our thoughts on dinosaurs from these slow, dead, stupid, sluggish reptiles that were just kind of waiting to go extinct to these fast and active and dynamic animals that were just as incredible and spectacular as anything alive today. But so one of the pioneers of this dinosaur renaissance was a guy named John Ostrom, who, with his description of the Raptor Deinonychus, established very, very firmly for the first time, although it had been proposed earlier, but he established very firmly and that birds evolved from dinosaurs, and it was just that simple. And John Ostrom spent his life kind of changing paleontology to reflect these ideas and how important this step in evolutionary history was, and how important dinosaurs were the evolution of modern animals. And towards the very end of his life, at an SVP meeting in 1996, this very fossil had been discovered and was being presented and was shown to John Ostrom, and he wept because it was the ultimate confirmation of his theory that birds are dinosaurs. And the Ischian, all the earliest dino birds, feathered dinosaurs, are coming from there. Not the earliest in terms of time, but the earliest in terms of when we knew about them.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's
And
monumental.
yeah, and it is fun hearing stories about that 1996 SVP where I think it was Phil Curie was the guy who described it, or on the team that was presenting it, and he kind of like the first day before anyone had presented anything had the photos in like a briefcase and was just like in the lobby of the hotel, and it's like, oh, Tom Holt, oh, whoever's walking in, just come here and look at this. So everyone knew what was going to be presented before it was fully presented because it was just like a, hey, come here and look at these photos.
And
So it sounds like it was a very fun time.
this fossil we're talking about that was the subject of Cole's story is Sinosauropteryx.
It's a little relative of Compsognathus that looks like a panda.
Yeah.
It looks like a red panda
Like a
specifically
red panda,
because
yeah.
we've been able to pull melanosomes from its feathers to understand that it had red and white banding across its tail feathers. But honestly, you don't need the feathers. You can just see it on the animal, this banding going on. It's
Well, I
incredible.
mean, you don't know if there's chemical
It's
changes that have gone on to change it, but yeah, you can still see the
yeah.
banding, yes.
It's the best preserved dinosaur of all time.
In the Yixian or Yishian, however you say it, there is a hybridont. So I'd
Let's
be happy no matter
go.
what.
I mean, and you're even getting insects with their patterning preserved. The preservation in this is incredible, and it's largely because this was a volcanic basin at high elevation. And what you're getting is you're getting these volcanoes to erupt, the ash is going into these lakes, and it's so mineral rich that it's able to actually convert a lot of the soft tissues into something that can stand the test of time and, millions of years. So it's a very unique ecosystem. It's really hard to find high elevation ecosystems. I
Yeah,
think this is
absolutely. And like the paleoclimactic reconstructions of the Ischian show that it was not cold, but chilly. It got cold in the wintertime.
Wow.
there was likely snow at least some of the time, yeah. And of course
And
that
it
can bring us to our
also,
other thing.
And we don't only have the little dino birds from here. We have, yeah, this is exactly what I was going to. Great synergy. But we have a giant tyrannosauroid coming from the Eocene. Tyrannus was still the largest known feathered dinosaur, which we have direct confirmation of feathers on, was a full-size, 30-foot long, 3-ton tyrannosauroid predator that was preserved alongside all these dino birds. And normally with these Lagerstättens, so most fossil ecosystems uh, preferentially preserve large-bodied animals because small stuff tends to get destroyed. So large things will just generally survive better. But in these Lagerstätte, the opposite is true. They're so gentle and so slow in formation that they preserve the exquisite details in all these small animals. But that usually is pressure against preserving anything big. But in the Yishian, it's so good that we have both big and small.
That's crazy. I didn't know about that. I'm looking at the Tyrannus holotype now, and it's not as beautiful as the Sinosauropteryx holotype, but it's still
It's several orders of magnitude
Well, and
larger.
there were three of them preserved together, more or less. So there's also potential for some level of gregarity existing in the species, although that's obviously very hard to test because they're dead.
I
Um,
think
I believe it. I believe it.
I think
I would
that
not be shocked.
I think that putting the Yishian versus the red beds is, to quote Graham from one of our previous podcasts, like feeding a nuclear bomb to a coughing baby. They don't like red beds didn't stand a chance. Red beds is cool and we had to defend it, but the Yishian is literally like the probably going to be the LeBron James of this podcast. It's insane.
The red beds would have gone well with the other with the Triassic formation that we covered last time.
Against
Yeah,
Chinley.
that would have been a good matchup. Red
Yeah.
Bed versus Chinle would be a
Yeah,
sick match.
Chinle. Yeah, yeah.
Chinley's
Yeah,
good.
Good
it's
though.
it's too monumental for our understanding of dinosaurs.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
think Yixian
Yishian.
takes a clean
It's
sweep.
Yeah, I
yeah.
vote Yishian.
Let's do it.
I'm gonna go the Nakano
Also,
because I might end up doing my PhD there. And I don't want the Red Beds to have no defenders, but the Ishian does deserve to win.
yeah.
Hey, find us a
Well,
Dimetrodon with skin impressions from a Nocona Lagerstätten.
there we
Yeah.
go.
Got it, boss. I'll get to work on it right away.
I would also say that the Xu Xing is the living paleontologist who's discovered the most dinosaur species.
Those
Oh,
dinosaur
yeah.
species that are
There's
still valid.
Yeah,
I mean, I still remember
yeah.
with Microraptor, there was some presentation about Archaeoraptor, which had this weird mix of things, and he was at the presentation where they revealed it, and he kind of went up afterwards and was like, "You have two animals that are stapled together. One of these I am doing for my PhD. The other one is this other species that's already known." But yeah. Zhu Jing would be the expert on the Yishin.
Wow.
All right, for the first round of our quarterfinalists, we have the Dinosaur Park Formation versus the Hell Creek Formation.
It's bigger. It's better. It's too much for Mr. Incredible. No.
I mean, no, it's you have the Hell Creek Formation, and then you have the Hell Creek Formation, but older. I mean, those are
Yeah.
it's
Well,
basically the same
and with
size.
more diversity and better preservation.
I mean, yes, that is true. That is true. You have more
More
diversity
time.
in
More
Dino
time.
Park
Yeah.
Better
and better preservation.
in the dinosaur park. I'm not quite sure I agree.
Well, I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure we have some dino mummies from Dinosaur Park, right?
Yeah,
I believe so, yeah.
think.
Yeah. So
But
we've got good preservation. It's not being looked at as much because it doesn't have T-Rex, so therefore nobody cares about it. But it's got more diversity, which in my book counts for more than necessarily size and fame of the animals involved.
It has
Do
feathers
people
preserved.
actually not care about it, or is that just like a
That
like
was
do you
that was
actually?
a that was a that was a jab.
Yeah, yeah,
Say,
but like, is it like?
dinosaur
Because I don't know the culture at least up there, but I mean, is that actually like a tangible thing that like
I don't know.
people just don't?
I don't go to Canada and I'm not allowed to. So
uh, I will say also Dinosaur Park does have feathers preserved in an ornithomimid.
I
Wow.
think it's got
Mm,
quill knobs preserved.
No. There's some
mm.
like downy fluff on one of
Oh,
their
cool.
specimens there.
Sick.
We
Gotcha.
are
That
we are
was Francois Thieren at the Royal Tyrrell Museum.
Lads,
Who did that?
lads, we're forgetting the Dinosaur Park formation has no Tanis. I'm just saying. Like, Tanis carries the Hell Creek so hard, and I know it's so controversial, but the fact that the site exists and preservation like that just exists in the Hell Creek is bonkers. Bonkers.
It's kind of the goat of Lagerstadts. It's like the most
Especially like
poetic.
sense. It's not just a
It's the most
random. It
poetic.
represents like the last day of the entire
The
Mesozoic.
last day.
Yeah, and so do a couple of
That's
like random,
insane.
and so do a couple of random formations in South Texas where you can see when the tsunami came in.
But they're not Lagerstadt. They're not
No.
like
Yeah, no.
they're not.
But are there any mass death assemblages of ceratopsians?
There's one, but it's like 3 of them.
Yeah, it's not
Okay,
even
that's not a mass
mass.
death assembly.
The word mass
Yeah.
is doing a lot of heavy lifting
Wait.
here.
Yeah.
Triceratops.
Wait, no. Here.
Triceratops
Sorry, go ahead.
been as gregarious and social as some of the Campanian ceratopsians. Like I've heard argument that it could have been like not a herding species.
Yeah, I've heard that chasmosaurians were less herding than centrosaurians were, because we have 2 mass death assemblages of like plus 100 animals from centrosaurians and 0 from chasmosaurians.
Mm.
I will say the other thing I think that the Dinosaur Park has going for it is it has a much better record of smaller organisms. The Hell Creek really has this bias against things, and I think it was Brown et al. Don't remember the year, that it's like things heavier than or under 70 kilograms or so are much less likely to be preserved in the Hell Creek.
But it
There
has
are
all those
some of the
microsites.
microsites.
You can get stuff, sure,
I
but it's not as common.
personally found really good microsites with Harry
Yeah.
up in the Hell Creek, like full of salamander vertebrae, little reptile vertebrae. You
Jeez.
get enigmatic teeth taxa like Ricardosthesia and Paranicodon also, with like just like some little mysterious little things in the Hell Creek that
I think
is
Dinosaur Park probably has Ricardosthesia. That thing's all over the latest Cretaceous
Yeah,
in
it
North
does. It
America.
does. I
I mean, it's a
remember
tooth
seeing.
taxa.
I remember seeing it when I was looking into it last meeting. It does.
Yeah, and I think that there's kind of been I remember when I was at North Dakota State Museum looking at Dakota, the mummy, and then Clint Boyd gave me a tour of the collections and stuff. And then we were both talking that in the last couple of years, because a lot of the Hell Creek smaller, a lot of that stuff has been described in like the last like 5 to 8 years, like pretty soon. And uh, it's there's kind of a change now where people are going back to their previous dig sites because they're actually finding that there's lots of microfossil deposit that's actually underneath some of the dinosaur fossil layers, dinosaur or turtle fossil layers. There's like it's hard to explain, but I guess you would have in a fluvial site, you would have the sand right where the sand meets that mudstone is where you have a lot of the rock, and then underneath that, or excuse me, a lot of the dinosaur fossils, and then under that you have these microsites. So people are going back and sifting through a lot of these things. There's a frog that is yet to be published on, but it's bigger than whatchamacallit.
Beelzebub.
Beelzebufo, yes.
Well, I mean,
So,
Beelzebufo got downsized by like 50%, so it's not really that much of
Yeah.
an achievement.
we'll see. Well, even before that, this thing is bigger. So before
I
that
mean, Russell's the
downsizing, yeah.
size guy, so I'll wait for his judgment on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, so we'll see when it's published. I hope it's published relatively soon. But yeah, so there are some, there's a plethora of turtle specimens. We're getting more birds. There's also salamanders from the Hell Creek, freshwater rays, lots of fish.
You get some
So there are,
pelagic
but there
sharks,
is,
too.
yes, and yeah, so there's definitely a preservation bias, and there's a preservation bias towards sort of medium to small size theropods, right? Because it's like you only found Anzu was first described in 2014, Dakota Raptor around that time, but I know that's a whole nother topic. But yeah. So there's kind of there's definitely a preservation bias for the smaller theropods and everything, but it still kind of has this cool. Smaller tier trophic level where you have things like thescelosaurs and pachycephalosaurs and uh, archaeoraptors and all the struthiomiids or nithamiids and leptoceratops too. So there's kind of a cool little ceratopsian that's almost like a protoceratops like in size. And so there is kind of a smaller layer. As much as we like to focus on the titans duking it out, there's kind of a cool assemblage of smaller species,
But does
even
it
though it's
have
biased.
any? But does it have any plesiosaur skeletons that are real taxon?
Hey, I can tell you what it does have.
No,
It does have a mosasaur,
it
probably
does have a mosasaur.
has been found in the Hell Creek. And possibly, I, I was at a conference in September where they were suggesting mosasaur teeth have been found in the Hell Creek, and the specimen that they were showing, I'm not going to list this researcher's name because, like, I don't agree with them, and I don't want to, like, sound like I'm attacking him or anything, but the specimen they were showing, I'm kind of positive it probably isn't mosasaur, but it doesn't look like any croc that's known either, so who knows? I'm gonna guess it's just a weird croc, but that's not what I'm referencing.
So it's got teeth. It doesn't have any
you
skeleton.
There is a mosasaurus hoffmanni partial skull has been found.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Never mind.
I will say in North America we don't really have the weird crocs, so
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
that's one of the issues.
So
it could-
overall, which one has more diversity?
Dinosaur Park.
Dinosaur Park.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
longer time. Yeah.
Which one overall has better preservation?
Probably tied except for Tanis.
Yeah.
Hell Creek does have nice
Well,
in general.
there are more mummies though than you would imagine coming out of
Well,
the
yeah,
Hell Creek, more
because
mummified
there's like
skin.
80,000 people like searching every inch of it for mummies.
Yeah.
So overall, which one has greater abundance of fossils?
Probably Dinosaur Park.
I
Dinosaur
would say
Park.
dino. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just it's more time, so it's gonna have more
So
stuff.
I might be an upset in this. I'm thinking that out of those three criteria, we have two going to Dinosaur Park, with one of them only going to Hell Creek because of the Tannocite, otherwise being a tie. So otherwise,
What about having bigger Tyrannosaur?
well, that's just personal bias if you like bigger things or not. I'm
Bigger
talking the formation
ceratopsians.
itself.
Does it have cats? Does it have Quetzalcoatlus?
It's got
Dinosaur Park.
Quadracus,
It
which
has
is an Astarchid.
Does Hell Creek
Cat
have
side.
Quetzalcoatlus?
No, it got named something
Well,
else.
What I know
Was
about
it
It's like
one other thing?
Inferno Dracon or something.
Okay.
It's nowhere near as big as Quetzalcoatlus. It's like the
Cryodraken from Dinosaur Park is, though.
oh yeah, Cryodracon's a lot bigger than Infernaz or whatever it's called, Infernaz Darko or
Gotcha.
something.
Yeah.
Inferno Dracon I think is like stork sized.
So what was the thing found out of North Dakota? The
That's
Astarcha. Was that it? Was that it?
That's
'Cause I
probably
always-
one of them.
Yeah, because I saw somewhere that Ketz was found in North Dakota somewhere.
And that
I
was,
would like
that
to
was
remind
Henry Thomas. Henry Thomas did the paper that named
Yeah.
Inferno Draken.
I would like to remind you guys also just about like Teen Rex, the amazing preservation of that Tyrannosaur that was found by those kids in North Dakota. It's being worked on right now at the Colorado Museum. Harry recently,
Denver, yeah.
and that's not a Lagerstadt site. That's just Hell Creek preservation. That's just how it looks.
Mhm.
So preservation, I'm not gonna lie.
Dueling dinosaurs.
Yeah, dueling dinosaurs is huge.
True.
It's a pretty big one.
Yeah, but so is like, an actual death assemblage of a whole bunch of animals.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's
Also
like
true.
what's so cooler.
And say if you want to do the actual science though, you also want to be able to like have some level of a statistically
Sure.
significant number.
So
You
I
get
came
that
in
from
this,
isolated specimens.
I came in this thinking that Hell Creek would take a clean sweep, but I'm going to vote for Dinosaur Park.
I have one last piece of evidence that's very logical that I think you guys might consider. When we're talking about Hell Creek versus Dinosaur Park, everything is really close. The preservation, all of that, it's pretty close. Like Dinosaur Park might have the edge on some things. The one place that breaks the mold where they're not really close is the Lagerstadt site for Hell Creek. That's Tanis. There's no Dinosaur Park equivalent of Tanis. And so if they're going to be close on everything, but then Hell Creek blows Dinosaur Park out of the
I
water.
mean, if you're picking it just based on, oh, well, the Tana site, you're saying, well, because the Hell Creek was lucky enough to be deposited when all the dinosaurs died, it should win.
Well,
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
basically what he's saying.
that is what
I
I'm
mean, but that's
Aren't
like an inherent part of the formation. That's not like
yeah.
yeah, and also too
I don't think you can separate those two.
aren't a couple things in this bracket just singular Lagerstadts as well, right?
I mean, at least like
I
La
mean,
Brea is, yeah.
right, and Messel, right? So
Yeah.
this is a formation that not only has um, everything else with it, it has like a pretty
My issue
renowned
with
Lagerstadt.
talking about
So
my issue with the Tana site is there's not been a ton published on it. And that's
Yeah.
where I'm drawing I want to see what they actually have before fully committing to it just on that.
That's
I know it
true.
sounds
Like
like
a
a
lot of
fantastic
a lot of the
site.
stuff is just rumors at this point.
Yeah.
Oh, we have an Asdarkid egg. Well, like where's the pictures? We have a Thescelosaur leg. Okay, where's the pictures?
No,
They have
I've
it.
actually seen that in person.
they have it. Yeah, they've got it scanned at like three different synchrotrons.
It was at Tucson this year. I saw it.
Yeah.
Oh, it was in Tucson? Damn.
Yeah.
Missed that.
Yeah, and they have synchrotron data from like multiple different localities that they took it to synchrotrons to scan it, that egg and other stuff. There's a plethora. There's a mountain of publications. Like last thing that I had heard, there's like over 40 in the works, and we're talking from seismologists. We're talking the NASA OSIRIS-REx mission is a direct research. That's the probe that went to the OSIRIS-REx. The asteroid collected samples, flew back. They recently had a really cool study about finding like nucleotides in it. Anyway, but Tanis is all with that. Really big into NASA with it. There's like Berger Schmitz is a renowned
I mean,
geophysicist and seismologist, and so just to make it clear, because this is always talked about, or Tanis is all a woozy or a fugazi. We don't know what's happening. No, there is. There's a mountain of data that's being published. There's so many papers that are in the works, and plus you have Melanie During's work. Obviously, there's a conflict between During and De Palma, but
I mean,
Melanie During's work seems to be accepted.
I do like During's stuff, yeah.
So,
and the Tanis is
it's real.
The Tanis is so new, and the work that needs to be done on it needs to be so detailed because of how extraordinary it is that you're not going to have a huge amount of papers about it yet. Like there are papers, but it's not like Solnhofen that's had a century of work.
Okay, I think everybody's made up their mind, so let's vote.
I have my vote for Dinosaur Park.
No.
Yeah, I think I'm going Dino Park as well, just because of the sheer diversity of it, mostly, rather than specifically Tanis site.
What are you doing?
So,
but
there's two.
I think Harrison going Hell Creek.
Jared and Harrison are going Hell Creek. Russell.
Wait, so we have 2 Hell Creeks and 2 Dinosaur Parks?
Yeah. Could this be 1.5 votes right here?
All right, so we're down to Cole and Russell.
I abstain.
You can't.
You can't abstain.
Wait.
Judith River.
If I bribe you with a random Admonosaur metatarsal, will you vote for Hell Creek?
This might be a coin flip one.
Cole,
what are you picking?
Well, so my answer is contingent upon a couple factors. One, if I vote Dinosaur Park, will Harry walk out of the show?
I'll be. It's okay. At least it'll end the fight. It'll actually bring peace to me in a way. The struggle is over.
2, I was hoping Russell would vote, and then I would be a tiebreaker, and then we could flip a coin.
But here's the other thing.
But now we have an odd number of people, and we.
True, but you want that Morrison showdown. I know you want it. I know you want it in your heart.
I do want that.
Okay.
But of course, the thing is, if we do vote Morrison, is just going to be the same talking in circles about the Hell Creek again.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
But it'll be more direct comparison of the fauna in that case.
I think Morrison gets absolutely steamrolled Sorry, no. Morrison absolutely steamrolls the dinosaur park. So yeah,
Well,
honestly,
let's focus the fight at play right now.
yeah. I'm going
Okay. Russell, will you vote for Dinosaur Park so I can vote for Hell Creek and we can flip a coin?
Let's say it's a Schrodinger's vote. Like my vote is dependent on your vote, who's dependent on my vote, who's dependent on your vote, and let's just flip a coin and get this over with.
Okay.
So we're
Okay.
doing
Oh,
a coin flip?
that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's
Coin
good.
flip.
Schrodinger's vote.
Yeah.
Okay. Heads is Hell Creek, tails Dinosaur Park.
Oh, let's go, baby. Oh,
Wait, what
I
is it?
didn't hear it called before the flip.
Let's go.
Okay.
No, we have to
Okay.
call it before the flip.
Okay.
Are you ready? So we'll do heads Dinosaur Park, tails Hell Creek, okay?
no. Okay, fine. Tails
Heads,
Hell-
heads Dinosaur Park, tails Hell Creek.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Yeah, that's
That's
yeah,
crazy. That's fate
that's
just telling
that's
us
pretty
to do Hell
divine
Creek.
there.
Hell Creek wins. I
Now,
like.
I went into this thinking I was going to vote for Dinosaur Park, and I did say that my mercy for Hell Creek would be over by in the first round.
Okay,
Balfour versus the Chadron.
Chadron.
I think competition's over already. Chadron for sure. I don't know.
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely the Balfour because it preserves such an important time in Earth's history.
But
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I mean,
it preserves
to be
the
honest,
most devastating extinction in Earth's history.
fair actually.
yeah,
That is-
but the Chadron preserves the time when Earth's fauna essentially became modern. That's when the Eocene hot house world ended and the Oligocene onward ice house.
That's the late Eocene through the Miocene. So that's like 30 million years there where it becomes modern. And the Chadron
Right,
is
but like for
a symbol
example,
of that.
Prothero always makes a big deal about about the changes happening specifically.
I don't care about Prothero. Dr. Prothero, if you hear me say that, please know that I'm exaggerating.
So, I
Well,
mean,
yeah.
I will say that I find the Balfour more interesting just because I love Gorgonopsids, but I also do love Entelodonts.
Well, so here's another counterpoint. What do we actually know about the ecology of anything in the Balfour Formation other than the fact that Dicynodon likes to dig burrows? I think we know that one of the Dicynodonts is also a specialized root eater, but beyond that, the ecology of this stuff is just not that well studied.
Well, but that's not because the formation sucks. That's just because there's more mammal paleontologists than Permian paleontologists. It's almost like a hierarchy, if you would. Like,
I mean, you could
maybe
also
like a
argue,
flowchart.
I would say, you can also argue, yeah, there's not going to be as many complex ecosystems because almost everything is dead.
Yeah, and we don't have any good modern analogs. We don't actually understand the signs that we're seeing. That's not the formation's fault.
But that's part what's interesting about the Chadron is we have enough of a modern context to see, oh, look how weird all this is. Also, preservation's a lot better because you don't have everything crushed to 5 ways from Sunday like the Balfour.
It's a Cenozoic formation. Everything's going to be better. That's just an inherent part of working in the Cenozoic.
Then again, the Gogo was Devonian, and that is better than like almost all Cenozoic lagomorphs.
And that was a very
The
unique
Gogo
Better-
is extremely restricted in terms of like time and place and diversity assemblage. It's cool, but it's restricted in everything else.
Isn't that all of these? I mean, they're almost all Lagerstätten. They're almost all oddballs, and they're supposed to be like they're notable because they're oddballs.
That's also true.
I mean, we don't have Messels popping up left and right.
Well, we don't have what terrestrial Lagerstätte do we have from the Permian? Like it just doesn't exist anymore. We don't have any. This is as good as it
Isn't
gets.
there isn't there
This
that
is
one that
what's
had
informing everything else.
the Varanopid with the soft tissue preservation?
Why am I taking the point on arguing for
I
the
think
Balfour?
I think some of that was questionable.
I see. I feel like the Chadron has
that
to
might
be
have been
more
different
abundant though, the fossils from it.
And you get all sorts of like little weird cool stuff in the Chadron. Like it's a well fleshed out ecosystem. It's not this preservation bias towards big stuff. Like you get like little weird animals in it.
No, the Balfour's got tons of big stuff as well.
I mean,
Little stuff as well. Excuse me.
On the one hand, the Balfour is in South Africa. feel like I'm obligated to defend that. But the Chadron, like, if I had a choice, I think I would rather do the Chadron. Like, I'd rather prospect in the Chadron, and personally.
Oh yeah, unless you have a big bore rifle with you if you're in the Balfour.
Yeah.
As much as
I think the fact that I work in the Karoo Basin and I might get eaten by lions, that's cool, actually.
That is cool. Well, there are no lions in the Karoo. I mean, all the lions are in what's the name of that giant national
Kruger.
Kruger, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then I might get eaten by something else, hyenas or
Jackal.
like
You get jackals in the Karoo.
Yeah, the hyenas in that part of the world aren't going to go after you unless you're a neonate Gemsbach. Or you're a melon. They like to eat melons.
I didn't know that.
So you can either get
20%
eaten
of their
by a
diet is
jackal.
melons.
So you can get eaten by a jackal in the Balfour, or you could get eaten by a coyote in the Chadron.
Yeah, there's
That's
lots
what
of
I'm hearing.
smart stuff in the Balfour.
Hey, you know what the Chadron has actually? You know what Badlands National Park has? Lots of bison. That is one point that is pretty interesting. I'm just saying.
Bison are the nerdy, dorky survivors of the Ice Age fauna, whereas in Africa, it's all mostly preserved.
Very, that's true. But
There's Cape buffalo in the Karoo.
in the Karoo, are you sure?
Yeah, I googled it. At least they claim it's Karoo. Maybe it's not quite Karoo. It's near the Karoo, but they're claiming, oh, we looked at this population in the what does it say?
Well, there are two
The
Karoos.
basin is big regardless, so who knows?
Oh yeah,
if
it's very big.
outcropping in the
They
same
say
area.
the Nama
This is a
Karoo.
strange place. This is a strange point to argue about which animals that you might run into in modern day these sites is cooler.
The Dorn Kloof Nature Reserve
I
in
did
Nama
bring it up.
Karoo.
That
And
is
let's be
my
fair, you're probably going to be more worried about like Pittis and Crotalus, depending on which one of these you're in for
Yeah.
your snakes.
Yeah.
Since I know that Oreodonts are literally
Tutsis are
everywhere.
confused.
Since I know Oreodonts are literally everywhere in the Chadron Formation, and I know that it's super abundant, they're both great formations. I'm gonna go Chadron on it.
Who cares about Oreodonts?
But I just know that
Oreodonts are
they're
the most
everywhere.
boring fossil animal of all time.
That's heresy.
I'm sorry I have to be the one that says it. I'm sorry that it's got to come from me. But
Yeah,
I'm
but
just
the hell
speaking
pigs
what
are awesome.
everybody knows. The Oreodonts are boring. Oh, this one's more like a rabbit. Well, this one's more like a deer. Who cares?
And who gives a crap about Dicynodonts? They all look the same.
Dicynodonts are cool, and there's nothing like them alive today.
Okay.
I was reading the book. I was reading that one book on
Listersaurus.
I was reading
I
that
would
one
lay
book
down
on
my
Dice.
life for the
Hang on,
Okay,
what's that book on
votes.
Dicynodonts?
Votes.
Hang on, it's GM King, the Dicynod book. I mean, she honestly sounds bored with Dicynodonts already. I mean, she was one of the experts.
I'm going Chadron.
So we two Chadrons.
Chadron.
I'll do Chadron as well.
Balfour.
So we got 4 Chadrons. So.
Yep. Great.
I'm carrying
Yeah,
it right
same.
now.
So your next one is the Kubifora Formation versus the La Brea Tar Pits.
Tar Pits
La
next. Tar Pits next.
La Brea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
La Brea.
Sorry, Kubifora cool has humans in it.
La Brea with the
So
dire wolves.
Now we have the Morrison versus the
Okay, this one's
Yishian.
tough.
Oh,
Okay. Historical significance of the Morrison. It's such an important part of how paleontology was made. The Yishin, on the other hand, has all of the feathers and soft tissues and stuff. So it's really
Foundational
coming.
versus revolutionary.
Yeah. So it comes down to, do you like having a better representation of large animals? Tyrannus is, I think, maybe the largest animal in the Yishin.
It's really like the only large thing. I think there's some isolated sauropod and like
Yeah.
associated other early Cretaceous stuff, but like Tyrannus is the only big thing from the.
So do we like a bunch of small things or a bunch of big things? And also a decent number of small things in the Morrison, because I know you get like some really good deposits with like tons of frogs and stuff.
Okay.
Well, I'm
Morrison
a
formation.
preservation guy, so I'm gonna say that the Yishian is definitely the top of the game for what it is. The fact that you see the feathers and you see all of the details, you can see some color pigments and stuff like that in the Yishian. I think that is a lot cooler than a bunch of bones that are radioactive from big dinosaurs.
What you just said sounds awesome. Okay, so Somebody share screen and pull up the Carnegie Museum Camarasaurus lentis juvenile specimen.
And while that happens, I do want to say something. If you get to a point where you've done a lot of field work and you've worked in multiple formations, there are some formations that you shudder to think about working in. For me, one of those formations would be the Morrison. That sandstone is like that stuff is hell. It looks like hell. I've never worked with it, but it looks like hell. But oh, that's a beautiful Camarasaurus.
Look at that.
You're working with smaller animals in better matrix to just work in the field with, like it's easier to work with. If I found a giant sauropod femur in the Morrison, I think I would just be like annoyed because I feel obligated to get it out, but I wouldn't want to.
How is that not a point in favor of the Morrison?
I would just
So that thing is awesome, but I feel like that is far more of an exception to the Morrison than a preserved feathered fossil in the Yixian.
A lot of the deposits are very broken up and disarticulated fossils.
Well, sure, it's a dinosaur deposit. It's just it's a different nature. It's a big dinosaur deposit, a different nature of work. Forests of sauropods.
True.
Picture it. Diverse. Different niches, different colors. Imagine these forests of land whales with their necks waving in the wind.
I would like to,
but likely there weren't that many adult ones. That's the thing.
I reject the whole like the Morse predators only eat baby. I think that's a little bit silly.
I do too.
You're okay.
I would like to say one thing we could probably all agree on, regardless of our positions, is if we can take a time machine to go back to the Yixian paleo environment in the Morrison, I think basically all the Morrison just has, in general, cooler, more interesting fauna. Where the Yixian gets huge points is in the preservation, but objectively,
absolutely, now incredible. But the Morrison formation is the foundation of dinosaur paleontology as a site. Forests of sauropods. Think about it. Brontosaurus, Stegosaurus, Allosaurus, Brachiosaurus, Diplodocus, Ceratosaurus.
Dude, my favorite.
What's the most famous animal from the Yixian? What? Probably Eutyrannus or Sinosauropteryx or Sinornithosaurus.
Psittacosaurus.
Because the mainstream media doesn't care about the Yixian. That's a point.
Yes, it does.
It honestly cares more about the Yixian than the Morrison because they don't even know what the Morrison is other than
nobody works the Morrison anymore. The Morrison's like dead science, whereas the mainstream media has moved on. Like in terms of what modern paleontology does, the dinosaur bird connection is the most like well studied outside of T-Rex is the most well studied like thing in all of paleontology generally. The Morrison is considered like this archaic thing from the past, even though there's still an enormous amount of data that nobody's doing any work with. So the idea that there's a bias against the Yixian for the Morrison is not true at all.
Brian Curtis would also concur. That's kind of his more latest research. He's like, there's lots of Morrison specimens that people haven't even published on. Like nobody's actually described it. It's at a museum. It's even mounted, but it's like the literature doesn't actually know that this exists.
Then let's get to votes.
I'm going to go Yixian.
Morrison.
This is so hard.
Jared votes Morrison.
I don't know. I'm literally 50-50. My favorite dinosaur as a kid was Marshsaurus for some reason. So, I mean, that's a point.
I'm voting for Morrison because I just want to see the Hell Creek versus Morrison face off.
I want to do Morrison because I'm currently working on a project discussing the Morrison.
Morrison, that's 4.
Great.
Wow. What?
It's a shocker, but that's where we're at.
If it was anything else, would murder. I'm sorry.
What?
The Hell Creek Formation versus the Chadron.
Oh my
Hell Creek.
Chadron next.
Hell Creek.
No, I'm joking. It's banter. Yeah, I like the Hell Creek more.
I like the Hell Creek too for this. Hell Creek is just a more unique environment than the Chadron. I mean, the Chadron.
It captures the last part of the dinosaurs.
Oligocene stuff is rare. I get it. Oligocene terrestrial mammals are rare, but
this one's Eocene. Chadron.
It's complicated. It's across the boundary.
Yeah.
An Oreodont would absolutely body a Rex.
I
How
would
many
Dig a
I would
hole
be
like a
a
prairie dog.
Oreodonts?
Rex steps his foot in, breaks its leg.
Yeah. How many Oreodonts would it take to,
Take the Rex.
assuming there's no fatigue at play?
I think I'd be
One
comfortable with Hell Creek.
trillion Oreodonts versus the sun.
Yeah. We should do a battle simulator, do a mod where it's like one T-Rex versus 10,000 Oreodonts.
Versus Dunkleosteus, both pre and post Russell.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think everyone would
Yeah.
say Hell Creek.
Hell Creek.
Okay, hold on. Let's vote real quick, just in case.
Just get a count. Yeah.
I have Hell Creek.
Hell Creek.
No, Craig.
I
Okay,
think it's a sweep here.
never mind. If Russell's not sticking it for the Shadron, then there's no hope of me putting down the Hell Creek before it gets all the way.
So now we have the La Brea versus Morrison.
Morrison.
Oh, Morrison.
I think.
Morrison.
Yeah.
The La Brea is
Yeah.
great for a single place. The Morrison stretches 13 states.
Yeah.
So I guess everyone's getting, well, not everyone, but some people are getting the fight that they wanted, the Hell Creek versus Morrison.
I did not predict
I
it.
was personally hoping for a Messel versus Yishian, but oh well.
I thought final round was gonna be Hell Creek versus Yishin. I thought that's what was gonna happen. That's crazy.
Okay, is there
sort of
anybody
say-
is there anybody undecided?
Me, actually.
I'm actually kind of
Yeah,
undecided
so-
too.
So the Morrison Formation, I think it's really important to note, has better plant preservation because you have like the Jurassic salad bar site. But you also get so much more diversity in what you have because you have Allosaurus, multiple species, you have Torvosaurus, you have all of these large theropods as opposed to Tyrannosaurus.
That's actually a good point. I hadn't really thought of that. Like, there's only one big theropod really in the Hell Creek, whereas there's, depending on how you slice it, anywhere between 3 and like 6 in the Morrison.
If you are a nano truther like myself, might be more than one. But
Yeah.
I was going to argue that the Hell Creek does have some decent plant preservation. I mean, obviously there's petrified wood everywhere, but who cares? Seeds, pine cones, and like Metasequoia pine cones. And then obviously that fern on top of Teen Rex that's like lying on Teen Rex's skull. Like it's it's the most beautiful.
Fair enough.
Like there's decent plant preservation in the Hell Creek.
There's good
I've seen the-
preservation in Hell Creek. There is a lot of interesting data on Morrison plants that is as of yet unresolved. Talking to Morrison's the last surviving Morrison specialists, they're like, yeah, if you want to do a really good study on Morrison, understanding the plant assemblages is going to be extremely important, and there's a lot of data to work with.
That's an
I mean, and
existential
also-
sentence you just said there, the last surviving Morrison
Yep.
specialist.
Nobody cares about the Morrison anymore. It's not T-Rex and it's not Dino Bird, so therefore nobody cares.
We have the same
Also-
issue in the Appalachian Basin where we've had a bunch of people who have like there's a bunch of like oral knowledge on Dunkleosteus that and other stuff from this area that's just kind of disappeared because no one
Did you
writes
say
anything down and
oral
everything's
knowledge?
orally known. What?
Did you say oral knowledge? Like it's some kind of like ancient religion from like
Yes, yes.
That's so funny.
To continue with the Morrison also, big sauropods. So you also have big sauropods in the Morrison
Mhm.
Formation. I think when you're looking at the overall ecosystem,
You
you
have
have a much
deep-
better look at what is happening in the Morrison Formation. So it's kind of this difference that you're getting between the Hell Creek and the Morrison Formation is there's gaps in the Morrison Formation of things we don't know, but they're smaller and consistent gaps as opposed to a number of larger gaps that we're missing.
right
in-
how the Hell Creek fits into all these other
Exactly.
Atlantean biotas, but it's not just sauropods present at the Morrison. Sauropods dominate the Morrison so thoroughly. John Foster applied. Looking at there was a study that looked at African large African animals and how often their bones preserved. The most recent Holocene sediments, elephants versus mice, essentially, kind of. And developed this kind of correction factor. This correction factor obviously is full of errors, right? So the Morrison is so thoroughly dominated by sauropods. But then you apply that correction factor to it to look at like what percentage of the biomass is being attributed of animal biomass contributed by sauropods versus smaller animals. Once you apply this correction factor that John Foster used to it, again, lots of error bar involved in this.
If you can send me that
Once you
paper,
apply
I'd
this correction
appreciate it.
factor, sauropods are still the largest contributor of biomass in the Morrison Formation.
Wow. And
It would just go ahead.
I would like to say, in the OG Walking with Dinosaurs, Morrison Formation was so much better than the Hell Creek episode. I'm just saying. The Hell Creek episode was awful.
I concur.
He had
I
balance.
For the
concur.
Morrison.
Wait, hang on. I
That's-
thought the last time we talked, you hadn't watched that yet. Did you go back and watch our sacred texts?
Yes, finally.
Let's
And
go.
I guess the other thing I was going to say is that, yes, with going off of the biomass with the sauropods, what do you guys think? I know this is kind of like diversion to a bigger conversation, but about the Allosaurus obligate scavenger hypothesis.
Nonsense.
Weak binocular vision, weak bite force,
Yeah.
So to be okay,
beta
okay. So
male metatarsals.
there's so much direct observation, direct like empirical evidence of behavior that Allosaurus was hunting things that it's I think almost a non-issue.
Multiple
And then-
individuals stabbed in the crotch.
Yeah. Which I mean, if
Yeah.
they were doing that so often that that's showing with the fossil record, then they must have been doing that enough that they were successful substantially.
And bite marks
Right,
on stegosaur plates, which is not
Mhm.
normally something you'd be trying to use
Right.
to get food.
Well,
It's more of an attack.
I don't even
Right.
think Allosaurus was a stegosaur specialist. I think Allosaurus was a sauropod specialist. I think
I-
Allosaurus. I think the idea that Allosaurus only ate babies and the amount of hoops you have to jump through to justify why it could only eat babies and why the most successful dinosaurian predator of all time from the fossil record was just going to ignore the largest food source in its region. I think that is an enormous amount of special pleading.
Well, and I will also sit here and state, in a few months when that volume comes out, there will be some interesting stuff
Ooh.
about larger
Ooh.
feeding mechanics.
Cool.
But yeah, like I think there's just a much broader ecosystem, and you can start talking about, potential niche partitioning between Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus and Torvosaurus, where Ceratosaurus is
yeah.
potentially living in these much harsher conditions in the Morrison Formation, as evidenced by its super rapid growth, where it's halfway grown at 2 years old.
Which
Right.
one, Torvosaurus?
Ceratosaurus. That was a recent
Ceratosaurus,
paper in like the
interesting.
last week or two, maybe, where it's
Oh,
growing
really?
so rapidly,
Okay.
like faster than
I didn't know this.
basically anything else we've seen. And so, maybe it's living more in these depauperate conditions, and so it's growing fast to compensate. But then you have maybe Torvosaurus as a megalosaur. There's been suggestions that it may have been hanging out more around the water, and I know there is some work coming down the pipeline about some of that as well.
And
Yeah,
Mark,
I've heard Torvosaurs tend to be more associated with like sediments that were washed in from upland regions, which I know like the upland, maybe they were upland animals as a bit of a paleomeme at this point, but it might have some more truth for Torvosaurus.
Yeah,
I
there's
see
some
in
stuff with that,
Torvosaurus,
yeah.
I see in Torvosaurus a lot of adaptations that are really similar in Tyrannosaurs. The fused interdental plates, the really robust and curved maxilla. It really is. I think there's some convergence on there. I see kind of Torvosaurus as the armored specialist, Ceratosaurus as like a very low slung, fairly strong but short neck muscles force specialist, something that would like lie in a forest, grab something and then shake it to death. And then Allosaurus is the open plains, mobile, strider of the what is the most common environment preserved in the Morrison Formation, which is why Allosaurus is the most common.
what do you think Marsosaurus did?
Mosasaurus, I believe, is also a megalosaur, so it's probably doing something similar to Torvosaurus
Yeah.
in being more around waterways, riparian areas. Because
Yeah,
that's the big debate about
Marsosaurus is
the-
known from one real specimen and then
Yeah.
half of a maybe specimen.
Yeah. And the thing is, you need to remember, again, this is like a very huge area. Again, you don't have the same trees and forests in Louisiana as you do in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And this is kind of the scale of the Morrison Formation. So you're going to get a lot of opportunity for a lot of different animals to live in there, as opposed to where you're in the Hell Creek, where it's largely just kind of swampy, forested, deltaic.
Except
Yeah.
for the upper portion of the Hell Creek. The upper Hell Creek transitions into a more upland forested environment, and that's why you get so many pine cones in it. And Ankylosaurus does not show up.
I just want to say,
other upland animal.
I just want to say, I have this Marsh's Dinosaurs book. So it's all the original Marsh monographs, and I believe it was reprinted in the 60s.
Ooh.
But I just wanted to share that. I know that's like doesn't contribute to this.
So
Given to me by Logan Paul, but
Speaking of uppermost portions of the formation, there's an extremely interesting phenomenon that we're noting in the Morrison Formation that needs far more exploration in the uppermost Morrison beds, and that is for those who listened to the episode with me with interviewing Andy Dannison, I brought this point up with him, is that we're seeing an increase in body size in all animals from the Morrison Formation, but mainly sauropods. The biggest species of sauropods are found in the uppermost beds, Amphicelius. This is a Camarasaurus, Apatosaurus ajax, are all the very tippy top of the Morse Formation, which is not very well, doesn't have a great fossil body known to us at this time. We are also getting an emergent giant allosaur species. That's whether that's Allosaurus annex, Saurophaganax epanterius remains to be seen. I think that that's probably all the one animal that is Allosaurus growing larger through time as a direct response to increasing sizes in we're seeing a relationship between the predators getting bigger and the prey is getting bigger. And if this is the case, again, not a tremendous amount of data, not as much as the rest of the Morse to work with, I think that this has some serious implications for predator-prey relationships in the Morse formation.
So before we vote, does Hell Creek have
yeah, can we?
rebuttals?
Yeah. Well, okay. So I
Sure.
guess we could just talk about the kind of interesting ecological conundrum, I think, that the Hell Creek runs into is that with its predators. So there's a camp that believes that Dakota Raptor and Nanotyrannus do not exist, and that it's just Tyrannosaurus Rex and some very small raptors, which to me does not make much sense. And now, if that was the case, that would make for an interesting ecology, because for those who reject the nano hypothesis, they say that Tyrannosaurus Rex occupied different ecological niches as it grew, thus negating the need for other predators in the ecosystem. As far as I'm concerned, I can't find a modern system of which that's happened. You could have things that occupy different niches as they grow older, of course, throughout the ontogeny. But it doesn't mean that that there are no other predators competing for that same niche. So
I mean,
when
your closest comparison is going to be on the islands of Komodo, because mammals
sure,
inherently are fed milk, so they don't undergo the same ontogenetic niche shift. So it's largely just due to modern examples being so mammal dominated.
But
right,
then you look
but
at Barbosaurus and Alioramus over in Asia. Um,
yeah,
that's a somewhat comparable ecosystem, and I would like to
yeah,
say that there is definitely whether you like. I get the arguments for saying Dakota Raptor isn't valid. Fine, taxonomic argument, great, but there was a big raptor in the Hell Creek. I've seen pictures that
Its actual size is kind of hard to interpret from the very limited stuff that's definitely Maniraptoran.
The other
So
thing is, and I'm not saying I support this, I'm saying this is the argument being made, is that the claim is a lot of the larger supposed dromaeosaur material is Anzu. Like it's just more Anzu material.
yes,
Well, I know
well,
yeah,
there's some
there is a big
arguments
raptor claw
about
that's from an animal that's anywhere from the size of a wolf to the size of a lion.
Yeah, but like Holtz thinks that's a Tyrannosaurus manual claw because it doesn't have
really?
a very
Okay, never
large
mind.
flexor tubercle.
Gotcha.
Are we
Okay.
talking about the Dakota Raptor holotype sickle claw, or are we talking about something else?
Supposedly, I don't keep up with.
I've seen
Yeah,
some
because
sickle claws, or pictures at least, large sickle claws found by collectors in the Hell Creek. One of them was actually a very bitter toward academics. He was talking in his caption about how he sold it for $15,000 and
oh
everyone.
yeah.
But like
No,
they exist, even if they're not really making it to public collections when they do get found because of dudes like that. Like there are some big
yeah.
sickle claws floating around from something very dromaeosaurid like, probably.
So
Yeah,
yeah, go
well, and I
ahead.
know there's some other material that's been talked about at SVP that might be dromaeosaurine.
yeah, and I've heard that too. That there's so much like undescribed Hell Creek dromaeosaur material on shelves at major institutions that's just like hasn't been described. So I was actually curious to do, I guess I'll announce it here. I mean, it's not like official, but I'm really looking at doing a Dakota Raptor project to either reject or accept the species. I want to go through different collections. It would be a big multi-year research project. Yeah. So I guess like what, because we were talking a lot about the really cool dynamics of the Morrison Formation predators, because there's more predators, there's more diversity. With the Hell Creek, you have more of a tyrannical situation where you have this one massive, preposterous creature that shouldn't exist in its size and power. And like if you look at skull morphology, you know, mammals have pretty strong bite forces. Things with more teeth have kind of different bite forces. I know we could get into that, but the T-Rex almost like breaks all kinds of, it has a bunch of teeth, it has a giant skull, and it's a very powerful, bite. It's the most powerful bite of any purely terrestrial animal, if I'm correct in saying that.
But it skipped
I
arm
know.
day. You know who didn't skip arm
Yeah.
day? Allosaurus.
Allosaurus, yeah.
Allosaurus still
But
can't reach its mouth.
and then, but yeah, I mean, Rex, you have, I know this is like glazing. This is like, I know we're glazing Rex, but it has ridiculous binocular vision, probably had the best vision of anything that ever walked, and insane metatarsals too, because nobody really talks about the metatarsals. They were really for like pivoting around and like, wrestling with this prey by which in the ecosystem that all have underwent this evolutionary arms race. I know that's always with dinosaurs in general, that term is used, but really with Kylosaurus and the ceratopsians
And we have
and then
evidence.
Edmontosaurus just
We also
getting
have evidence for that with the bigger sauropods and the bigger
right,
Allosaurus being in the top of the formation. So we're seeing very
right,
similar things.
right, right.
Oh,
But
they do have an arms race, yeah.
Well, I
yeah,
will say if it is
the,
an arms race, the T-Rex certainly lost.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So
yeah.
I a couple weeks ago I got to actually hold the Allosaurus Anax thumb claw. Sh Call that shaking hands with danger. And
Mm,
that claw is is in response to this idea that Tyrannosaurus is this super advanced, like better than anything else that it's ever done at Predator, which in a lot of ways, I want to be honest, it is. But this claw is, I'm going to quote Matt Weedle here, is the most impressive tool of dinosaur destruction I've ever seen. It's the size of my head, but it is the largest known claw of any terrestrial predator of all time.
Oh wow.
So
yeah.
the Megaraptorans, slightly longer claw, not nearly as thick and robust.
Mm.
Spinosaurus turns out wasn't terrestrial. Um, and Therizinosaurus is of course not a predator. So they're all of its contenders kind of knocked off. It is terrifying what this claw would have been capable of.
The time to
I think
vote is now.
we've
Yeah.
all had good times to spread our propaganda for our chosen formations. I am voting Morrison.
I'm voting Morrison as well.
I am
Morrison.
also voting Morrison.
I got
Morrison takes it.
Don't go down with a ship.
Okay, hold on, Jared. Jared, what's your take?
I honestly was really split, and if everybody voted for Hell Creek, I would have voted for Morrison. That's how split I was.
Okay.
So yeah,
Think of this: forests of sauropods,
yeah.
forests of land whales.
Yeah.
So anyways, if you've made it to the end, let us know what your picks would have been if you agree with us, if you disagree with us, if you disagree with some of our paleo propaganda. And don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. And yeah, thank you so much for staying tuned. We'll catch you in the next one.